For March 3rd to order. Clerk.
Councilmember Philseth?
He's here.
Hello. Councilmember Niss?
I'm here.
I'm here too.
Councilmember Scharf?
I'm also here.
Councilmember and Chair Schmidt?
Here.
4 present.
Thank you. Is there anyone who would like to speak for open communication? See no cards. So we have a full agenda tonight. I know there are 3 items on the agenda. They are all important and time sensitive. So we do have to get through the meeting. I would like to set a deadline of 10 o'clock for the meeting.
Ooh, 9:30.
We were all
up till
here late last night. So with that in mind, if we could plot out the agenda to make sure that we start item number 3 by 9 o'clock. So let's start with item number 1, curbside collection. Staff, do you want to?
Mr. Chairman, we had thought that had gotten clear, rearranged the schedule to where we were putting the mid-year first. And we've got a bunch of different department folks here who are here for answering questions, and then we can dispense with that. And
Okay, is that
That's okay.
satisfactory to the other members of the committee?
Got it.
So we will do number 2 first, Finance Committee recommendations.
I appreciate it. Good evening, Walter Rossman, Budget Director. I would like to make a brief presentation about the fiscal 2015 mid-year budget review. As it's customary, 6 months after the adoption of the budget, staff evaluates the financial status of all funds and also makes budget adjustment recommendations to the Finance Committee at first and then to the City Council. With today's presentation, I will focus on the general fund, the some enterprise funds, and the capital improvement fund and program. Let's look at the general fund status first. I'm pleased to report that staff expects the general fund to generate a one-time budget surplus of approximately $5 million by year end. And the primary reason for this is that some revenues have performing better than expected. With the budget surplus, the budget stabilization reserve in the general fund is projected to be $38 million by the end of the fiscal year, or 22% of the adopted expenditure budget. The Council's target of the budget stabilization reserve is 18.5%, or $32 million. As part of the fiscal 2016 proposed budget and the closing of this current year budget, staff will bring forward recommendations regarding the budget surplus, which will align the budget stabilization reserve level to the Council target of 18.5%. Sure, I can do that. So basically, we'll, as part of the next budget cycle in fiscal 2016, and when we close out the current year budget, we'll bring forward recommendations on how to use these extra funds.
So, Chair Schmidt, 1 second. Didn't we agree that the extra surplus goes in infrastructure? I thought we voted to do that as part of our infrastructure plan.
You made some decisions last year as it was in closing the infrastructure gap. The Council has a standing, has authorized the city manager on a standing basis to be free to make the decision in any year in which we have excess capacity to dedicate that to the infrastructure reserve, which has been our practice. That certainly will be one of the recommendations we'll be looking at for fiscal year 2016.
Okay.
Thank you. Since the primary reason for the budget surplus is projected at this time is due to the higher than expected performance of revenues, I will focus this presentation first on these revenue streams which have increased. First, let's discuss those revenue streams that are projected higher, and that's the property tax. Property tax, due to the latest information from the county assessor's office, is supposed to increase or projected to increase by $600,000. Primarily due to a one-time adjustment of the accrual period from 12 to 13.5 months in the current year, sales tax is projected to increase by $3.3 million. Finally, as you know, the transit occupancy tax rate increased from 12 to 40% as approved by the voters. This tax increase is the primary reason for the increase in projections of the transit occupancy tax receipts in the amount of $1.7 million. The last non-tax revenue category, which shows significant increases, is charges for services. There are two reasons for the higher projections in comparison to the adopted budget. First, in the adopted budget, we assumed that the golf course will be closed, and as you know, it is still open, has remained open, and has generated revenue. And secondly, we are getting an additional reimbursement from the Fire Stanford fire contract due to the reconciliation of fiscal year 2014 charges. However, the discussed revenue increases are offset with lower than anticipated receipts for utility user tax and document transfer tax. The recommended downward adjustments for UUT or utility user tax projections are primarily due to lower water and gas consumptions by Palo Alto residents. As you know, we are in a drought, so Palo Alto residents have consumed less water, and we have experienced a warmer than expected winter, which has reduced the gas sales and therefore the UUT receipts for gas. As previously reported, receipts from the document transfer tax can vary significantly from year to year. Through December, tax receipts are running 44% below last year's projections or period. Therefore, staff recommends reducing that revenue receipts projections by $1 million at this time. Now that we discussed the revenue side of the general fund, let's focus on key issues regarding general fund expense adjustments. Please note that expense adjustments I will be highlighting here are net increases to departmental budgets. First, for new requests, staff recommends funding for approval of 4 items with an impact of just over $100,000 to the general fund. A temporary increase to a performance audit position from half-time to full-time, and this is part of the At Places memo you received tonight from us. Then secondly, an online sustainability dashboard. Third, a fire services resource deployment software. And fourth, an integration of the development impact fees in the planning department as part of the city's online permit processing and tracking system, Accela. As part of this report, staff recommends a reimbursement from the state for overtime incurred during the 2014 fire season, as well as 2 grants the library received. The reimbursement for the overtime is $184,000, which are recommended to be adjusted to be recommended to increase the overtime budget at the fire department. In December 2014, Council approved the reimbursement to Ada's Cafe for construction delays at Mitchell Park, which was initially paid out of the city manager's contingency account. We're asking the Council to reimburse the account with an action tonight. Regarding cleanups, as part of the development of the 15 budget, inadvertently, staff did not budget for the Know Your Neighbor grant program in the amount of $25,000, and we're asking that the council or the committee recommend to reimburse the city manager the contingency account for that amount. And lastly, we are proposing to add 1 position in the attorney's office. With this mid-report without funding, this will allow the city attorney to recruit for this principal attorney position, and the funding for this will be included as part of the 2016 proposed budget. Now turning, as requested by the Finance Committee in December, as part of the discussion of fire and police overtime expenditures, staff included a detailed discussion of overtime for these 2 departments and a net cost analysis in attachment F attached to this report. As of December 31st, 2014, the fire department expended about 95% of its $1.4 million budget. The primary reason for the current level of overtime expenditures are threefold. First, the deployment of fire staff to Northern California during the 2014 fire season. Second, number of vacancies currently in the department. And third, sworn staff on workers' compensation leave. It is important to note that this report recommends the reimbursement of the amount due to the fire season deployment of $184,000. Given the current level of vacancies and related vacancy savings, staff expects that the fire department's salary and fringe budget combined will not be exceeded by year end. Regarding the police department, for the first 6 months of the fiscal year, the police department expended 2/3 of its overtime budget, primarily due to vacancies and workers' compensation leave. At this time, the department's salary fringe budget is tracking slightly higher than expected. Therefore, staff will carefully monitor the police department's budget so that it will remain within budgeted levels by year end. Now that we've discussed the general fund, I'm switching my presentation to the enterprise funds and then the capital improvement program. As part of the approval of the mid-year budget review, staff recommends significant adjustments in the electric, gas, and water funds. The primary reason for the adjustments recommended are due to the ongoing drought and the warmer than expected winter. For the electric fund, the drought resulted in a lower generation of hydropower and the necessity to purchase more electricity. For the gas fund, the lower cost for commodities and the warmer than expected winter resulted in lower commodity purchase costs and also in even lower revenues from utility customers. And lastly, due to the drought, Palo Alto residents consumed less water, resulting in lower commodity costs and revenues for the utility with a near zero impact to the fund. In preparation for the fiscal year 2016-2020 capital improvement program budget, scheduled for release in late April, staff reviewed all active projects and recommends closing out 36 projects in all funds. The impact of closing existing projects returns $2.7 million to those various funds. Finally, staff also recommends adjusting funding for 5 projects to align funding with circumstances facing these projects as of today. For example, decreasing the funding for development of the Los Altos treatment plant site is recommended, as regulatory agencies will only process permits for specific uses. As you might recall, 2 years ago, staff allocated, or the council approved allocation of funds to study to reuse the site. But once we actually receive the permits and we understand what we can do, we can start refunding for this project again. In summary, with the adjustments recommended in this report, all funds expected to end the fiscal year within budgeted levels. The general fund is projected to generate a budget surplus of approximately $5 million, primarily due to the net increase in revenues. Therefore, I ask that the committee forward this report to the City Council for approval, and we are staff as well as I are available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. Thank you, Walter. I just wanted to repeat some information related to the revenue side of things. Again, that you're aware of, but one was the point about the sales tax revenue increase being one time given the readjustment of the accrual period. So we basically are going to be collecting 13 and a half months revenues as opposed to a 12-month period. So it's not a structural change in that revenue. Also, the TOT increase again, that additional revenue isn't entirely fungible, as you know. I mean, partly that was related to the voter approval, and that money is to be dedicated to the infrastructure funding plan. And then lastly, the changes on the cost side in the enterprise funds. Obviously, later on, the discussion about the rates will have some interconnect with that situation there. And that's all I had to add.
Good, thank you very much. I guess our goal tonight is make a recommendation to the council for approval. But let's start with questions or comments that council members might have. Is there anyone who would like to say?
I want to ask a general question.
Please.
Just starting at, a higher altitude. If we look back to 2010, what was the deficit in 2010? I know you weren't here, Walter.
That is correct.
Let's ask Jim.
Can you look it up, please? Well, we'll try to find out for you. Just a moment.
So Jim will know where I'm going on this. So we have ended up at a very good point. We're in 2015. The economy is doing really well. We're putting money in our stabilization fund. We're in good shape. At some point, though, the public is going to say, what are you doing with that surplus? Sometimes the surplus is as difficult to deal with as a deficit is. So put some meat around this discussion, because it's really an intriguing one as to what you do with the budget, when it goes up, when it goes down. We're also going to hear from the people who buy water when the water rates go up because they're not using enough water. That will happen as well.
Did you
It's
want
your chance to pontificate.
Well, actually, so I don't remember the dollar amount because, it was 2009, 2010, 2011. 2010 was probably the worst year, but 10 million, $10 million
million.
in 2010.
Yep.
So, and of course, we, over that period of time, I think we reduced general fund positions just as by about 12% or something. That was significant. But even in the downturn, one of the things that we did that has served us well was understanding the cyclical nature of the economy and revenues. We did not tap into and drain reserves below the council's established ranges. And and I think that was absolutely the right policy. There are lots of reasons for that. I mean, we're, again, one of the few AAA bond-rated agencies in the state. That serves us well. Things like, not jumping all over the place in our financial management is a key factor in that. So in the same sense, when we're in a time when we're generating surpluses, the council has essentially, I think, made decisions to spend down those surpluses on one-time expenses, not obligating us to recurring costs. So you have basically helped close the gap in the infrastructure funding plan. Last year, there were a series of one-time items that the council approved to spend that down. But I think, again, very wisely, you've not used reserves as you spend them down to obligate you to future expenses. And that's been wise.
Mm-hmm. So it's really good to be in this position. But I know another reason why we may have some on hand is because, as we've talked, we haven't been able to hire some people. And therefore, that puts extra money in the budget in a way that we would prefer it not be. But what I wanted to call out is there's a big difference between the minus 10 million 5 years ago and being up 5 million, which is, fortunate for us as a state. It's also where we are. We were down, as you remember, maybe 200 million at that point, which was incredible, or it might have been billion at that point. So we're in such a good place now that I'd like to just enjoy it for a while. Truly, I mean, it's very painful when you're cutting and when you're these finance committee meetings could be filled with people who think that their departments are going to get cut or that they're going to lose people. It's sometimes I think it's not bad to just say we're in a good spot. Let's work with this, but also know that we're right now comfortable. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was going to say it.
Hardly a tough question, but
As Jim, as you point out, we should enjoy it this year because of the 5 million, 60% of it is an accounting change, right? So it's real, but it's not recurring.
Could you just repeat that? I'm not trying to follow. You said it was accounting change?
It's the recognition of 13 and a half months of sales tax instead of 12.
So, one of the temptations, of course, we have to guard against is the sense that other people can, misunderstand the good times and think that they go on forever. And so, again, I think our focus and recommendations as we're putting together the 2016 budget, of course, is to, even though we have a lot of demands, not to really be increasing our staffing. As you recall, last year, actually, with a lot of pent-up demand, I brought an increase in general fund positions that the council, the finance committee was not comfortable with us funding those at those levels. And you asked us to go back, and we looked at a number of scenarios between whether just sort of contracting something out, being able to charge fees for the service or something, and cut back those positions almost, in half or something from what we had. So I do think we need to guard against that. And of course, as you well know, we have these unfunded obligations, deficits that are out there that are, that in many ways we sort of always talk about as sort of a shadow budget that follows us through time that we've got to pay attention to also.
And that's probably worth a discussion, not tonight, but on another night about the unfunded liabilities. Because some other agencies are, handling it slightly differently, and we might take a look at what other governmental agencies are doing as well.
Good. Councilmember Scharf.
So I actually have some in-the-weeds questions. The first one is, what is a sustainability dashboard? What is a sustainability dashboard?
So
And why are
obviously,
we
see,
buying it?
the whole mindset of, using dashboards as far as, agglomerating metrics and that sort of thing, rather than a series of spreadsheets. But Gil is out here, I think, right? Give him a chance to get more specific.
Sure. Good evening, council members. I'm Gil Friend, Chief Sustainability Officer. The sustainability dashboard would be a cloud-based performance management system that would make it easier for us to streamline the collection and the analysis of sustainability performance data. This is everything from energy and resource use to carbon emissions to the different kinds of fuel use of our city fleet, tree cover, water use, the various metrics that will matter to us currently collected in a fairly slow and by hand process by a lot of staff and a lot of departments. So it streamlines the collection of that, brings us the kind of data that will bring you in an annual Earth Day report. But instead of that being once a year as a result of months of work by 12.5 staff members, it would be available each month in an ongoing view of trends on the critical variables that matter to us. It also, by using automated data collection from existing city systems, reduces the chance of error in the reports that we build, and really fundamentally would allow the council and the community to have a better, more accurate, real-time view of the trends and performance on the things that matter to us so that we can manage better and more effectively for that.
So if I understand it, it's a software package.
It's a software as a service, a cloud-based software package, not hosted here, but hosted in the cloud.
And what I'm also hearing you say is that it will save a lot of staff time and therefore allow more productivity for the staff to do other things.
That's
right.
one of the strong motivations for doing it, yes, sir.
And ongoing trend comparative data and the ability to report it in graphic and visual ways that is easy to sort of take a look at and see trends again, so that you can think of those annual reports that you've seen that will have different pie charts and trend lines and all of those things that and can let us run multiple sustainability factors, whatever it is, whether it's cost versus CO2 reduction versus those sorts of things. And Gil, you might just hit a couple of the kinds of measures that we were talking about in reporting in the dashboard.
Well, sure. We'll start with greenhouse gas emissions, but being able to slice and dice those, so to compare them year by year, compare by department, compare by different function or the activity that generated those. We'll be able to look at energy and resource use across the city and commercial and residential customers that Palo Alto Utilities has, to understand where the increases and decreases are, understand rates of change, be able to more effectively target where to deploy our efficiency programs. We are looking at improving the profile of the city's fleet by prioritizing electric vehicles where they're appropriate, so we'll have a clearer sense of what our fuel use and emissions are by different vehicle types over time, so we can more effectively optimize the decisions, allocations, purchases, and management of all that. And really, I think equally important, all the specifics here, council member, is to make that information available in an easy to access and easy to understandable form by staff members, so that more and more people on the ground doing the work can have a better view of what they're doing, what the impacts of what they're doing is, and how they can manage more effectively.
So will the data be available for people to integrate into apps using some sort of an API?
I'm sorry, to integrate into?
To apps that people might write?
Potentially. That's not the first phase. The first phase is to get this up and running, get the data integrated, and do some shakedown ourselves with our own internal uses and reports to council, but that potential is there to open this up to community, subject, of course, to appropriate, confidentiality concerns.
So we have a
and so
strong
forth.
open data policy.
Yes.
And I'm really concerned sometimes, just want to make sure that we don't lock ourselves into something, because I ask this question now, you come back to me, I'll remember, you'll come back to me and say, we can't do that because we've got a contract and we've, made our decision already and we're locked in. So I just want to make sure that that doesn't occur.
This was one of the criteria in the RFP and the selection of vendors, that there is no lock-in.
So why is this a second phase? Just why can't the data go up? Why is it a second phase as opposed to not doing it all at once?
Two factors. First is that we want to make sure that it's clean and accurate.
Okay.
We're in the process of building the Earth Day report for you now. We're not confident that all the data is accurate. We're not worried in particular, but we have to validate and verify that what we're putting out is accurate. Second, it's a question of resources. The license that we have negotiated with the selected vendor provides a finite number of seats. It doesn't provide 66,000 seats. So we have to negotiate with them how widely we want to open, how much data we want to open, and we'll certainly, my inclination is exactly the same as yours. The default should be as open as possible, as wide as possible.
So wait, you're saying that by using the software package, they limit the number of people who actually can see our data? Is that what you mean by seeds?
Well, so can I jump in?
Please.
So I think the concept obviously is for us, as we do with whatever, Microsoft or anything else that we buy, software that we use, and we're buying a certain number of licenses for us to be able to use that ourselves. Once we really have the data, though, itself clean and scrubbed, we're going to use that to produce this dashboard report. At the same time, our basic policy is open data by default. So my expectation always is that we will essentially dump that data onto our open data website, which will allow other people to access it and slice and dice it very differently than we have with this software. And obviously, always hoping somebody will, for free, create some app, as you're saying, Councilmember Scharf, or something else that amplifies or multiplies the benefits we're getting from the data.
What we'll start doing right away.
I was going to say I'm sold,
Okay.
but if you want to.
Thank you. Let me just add, Councilmember Scharf, what we'll start doing right away is start adding specific data streams to the open data site, as we've already done. We've added a few in the last couple of months. Those will come up very quickly, and then increasingly we'll put selected what we think are highly useful data streams on that site, and then we'll work very much in the direction of the vision you outlined, to open as much as possible, as quickly as possible, with the understanding that people in this community will find meaning in that data beyond what staff is able to do. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
So the next thing is the increase in the transit occupancy tax. I think we need to segregate that money for infrastructure. We went to the voters. We said we're only increasing and I think that needs to be shown and not just mixed in with the general fund. I think that's inappropriate.
Councilmember Scharf, that is indeed our intent, that we do this as part of closing the budget for this fiscal year, and we can definitely, as part of the report as it goes to the full council, to show you the detail what it would look like.
Okay.
We're also doing the same for the new hotels as well, which is also to go for infrastructure. So we have those parsed out.
Perfect. I appreciate that. So the gas fund. This is a bit of a warning sign to me. This says gas fund, $3.4 million reduction in reserves. And frankly, when you say lower commodity purchase costs, no, that helped the gas fund. That didn't hurt the gas fund. So I think that's sort of silly, frankly. When you read the report, it actually says that people are buying less gas. That's what I took out of this. And that was offset by the lower commodity purchases. But if we didn't have the lower commodity purchase prices, we'd be worse off. Now, the other thing I noticed is it looked like there was a $2.6 million accounting error in the original budget. So that also equates for part of the reason was the 3.4. So I just wanted to make sure that my understanding is correct.
That is correct. So when we set up the budget for the gas fund in 15, the other issue we had, we didn't align it well to the financial plan, which we're fixing now for 16. That's the other reason, correct.
So Gil's out there pushing fuel switching. So the question I have is, what are we going to do in terms of a long term to make sure we don't crash our gas utility, given that we're already starting with just with a slightly milder winter? We're already 3.4 million, which is really 3.4 minus 2.6 in the hole, but you're offset by lower commodity costs. If we didn't have the lower commodity costs, that would be much worse. So when we have a what do we call it? Basically, in the past with our refuse fund, what we did is we underpriced the mini can to get people to switch. Everyone switched to the mini can, and we crashed the refuse fund. And it's taken years to sort of build that back up and get out of that. And I see it's going down the exact same pace on the gas fund. And so I'm just sort of wondering what you guys are planning on doing to make sure it doesn't happen.
So it's a good question. I'll take Gil off the hook a little bit. He's certainly pushing fuel switching as a kind of big goal type question, but right now we're mostly responding to the colleagues' memo from the council on fuel switching, and we made a point of really wanting to be able to come back to the council first with the implications of what that fuel switching might mean. And I think that it's at that point, and I'll make sure that we do, that sometime in the next 6 weeks or something, I think we're scheduled to be coming back on that, that your question is something that I think appropriately comes up at that point, and we'd be in a better position to answer it.
Okay, fair enough. All right, I think that was my...
Good, thank you. Councilmember Filsa. Questions, comments?
I don't have very much, but I was looking at the gas thing that Greg was asking about, and I noticed that there was so we're going to dig into we're going to dig into the reserve for gas by 3.4 million, which, as you pointed out, would be 5.5 if it weren't for cheap gas, right? But one of the elements was we were inadvertently overstated customer sales revenue in the 2015 budget, and I noticed there's a very similar line in the electricity as well, which is we overstated by 5.3 million, and we're also reducing. Is that the same error?
So what happened, council member, is as you see today, the financial plans are coming forth to the committee with the utilities, and when we aligned we should have aligned the financial plan to the budget document, and that was unfortunate, was a mistake which we made.
Okay.
We are right now actually working very close with the utilities to make sure for 16 it's properly aligned and the numbers are the same.
Okay, so it's a one-time.
That's correct.
I did want to point out we have John Abendschein from Utilities here who can answer in much more exquisite detail than I can some of your gas and electric questions.
Okay, John Abendschein, Rates Manager for with the Utilities Department. I just want to be really clear that we're not seeing decreases in reserves that are directly related to these, the mistakes, the coordination issue that we had. We set our rates based on accurate revenue numbers, and so the revenue decreases that you're seeing are, they were taken into account in our rate planning. So the health of our utilities are healthy despite these, the lack of coordination with the budget process. Yeah, absolutely. And we'll be talking more later about the financial forecast, so we're happy to answer any questions later on.
Thank you.
Okay.
Eric, are you? I have been away from finance for a while, so I have some basic questions. I'd like to start with page 64, packet page. You have the fiscal year budget lined up for the general fund, electric fund, gas fund, and so on. And there are 3 columns: adopted budget, adjusted budget, and mid-year budget. Now, the adopted budget I can find in our budget. You're asking us to approve the adjusted budget. Are we approving the second column or the third column?
The second column, the adjusted budget, reflects all the actions the council has approved in the last 6 months with budget amendment ordinances. as well as includes encumbrances which are carried forward. So what we're asking you to approve today is the recommendations, specifically each action identified in attachment A of the report. At the attachment, the mid-year budget actions. This is really a large budget amendment ordinance where we're adjusting the budgets in various funds.
So every adjustment we're talking about tonight is in the third column.
That is correct.
So actually, when we sit down in a couple months with the new budget, we will be given the adopted budget from last year, and then your expected, what do you call it? Anticipated budget for 2015.
As
And
part
then-
of the budget hearings?
Yeah, and then we look at 2016 as a function of that.
That's correct.
So if we just look at columns 1 and 3, throughout this, there are some astounding differences. And I scratch my head and say, gee, they don't look like the budget that we went through a 6-month process to approve. The general fund, for example, you have encumbrances and reapportionments of $6.3 million added in. Sources of funds increased by $12 million. Net surplus has changed. The BSR balance, but it shows up especially in utility funds. If you turn to page 65, the net reserves were, in our adopted budget, were 3.7 million decline. Now they're a 22 million decline. Total sources of revenues, you've got the reapportionment encumbrances of 14 million added in. How can the budget be so dramatically different from what was voted by the council a few months ago?
Sure. So there's really 2 factors there. One factor we are taking care of, that the council actually approved for us to do differently starting this fiscal year with the 16 budget. So as you can see, there's a line for capital improvement program. It's $9 million, $9.7 million in the adopted budget, and the adjusted budget is $24 million. So the majority of those are reappropriations. Those are funds which are in existing projects and carried forward from year to year. What we're asking council to do starting 16, instead of doing this on an accounting basis through reappropriations mechanism, we're actually asking you annually to reappropriate existing funds. So that will change the variance.
So you're saying that when we do the 2016 budget, that line of reapportionments and encumbrances will be included as a revenue item in the 2016 budget?
Not yet encumbrances, but reappropriations, yes. Encumbrances is a different way of budgeting, and we have not done that yet here, but you could also do a parts of encumbrances as well. It is a little bit more complicated, so we start with reappropriations first. It's just the way how we do our financing and budgeting.
So it's a dramatic difference, though, of tens of millions of dollars.
With
in
the
some of these
reappropriations
accounts.
getting, yeah, that's
So if I might point this out, though, I mean, as it relates to what we're doing here, we typically have had a fairly sizable reappropriation in the capital budget, given the nature of both, planning for spending and then how projects can unfold. And so we've been in a situation every year when the council actually goes ahead and adopts both the capital and the operating budget. We haven't reconciled those things at the start of the year, and so these have been coming in. So at this point in the year, we're making these significant reappropriations. And I told the staff that I didn't like that idea either, that at the start of the year, we should anticipate more directly what we're not going to spend in the current year, and the capital budget and everything that we adopt includes that reappropriation at the start. So
Now,
you won't
does the
see
reappropriation go through a reserve account?
That is correct. What actually,
Let me
okay.
follow up that question. Councilmember Scharf asked earlier that there is an old council code that says reserve accounts above that end up in our basic reserves are identified for infrastructure transfers. Now, I assume you have some other way of accounting for reappropriations that do not get put into the general fund reserves or the general reserves of these accounts.
And there are really two issues here. One issue is that you have funds or dollars in existing projects which get carried forward or reappropriated. That was we still did this fiscal year. The second piece, which also Councilmember Scharf talked about, is when we have surplus funds at the end of the fiscal year in general fund, then we'll come forth with recommendations based on city manager recommendations to the Finance Committee and to the Council on how to use those surplus funds. So there's really two different issues, how we treat those dollars.
So the first category are identified, they are encumbered funds. Is that right?
They're encumbered funds to some degree, not necessarily in contracts, but what the old former code allowed us to do is that if money has been spent in the project, as long as money has been spent in the project, it gets automatically reappropriated the remaining funds, unless for 2 years the project was not touched, no money was spent, then we'd have to come back to the council. And that's the change we've made now, and the council approved in fall, that regardless of the money is spent in the capital project or not, we have to come back to you to ask for reappropriations.
Yeah, that's a positive step, and all I say is maybe as we move into the 2016 budget, that this be explained and shown.
That is our intent.
David?
Let me also add one clarifying point. David Ramberg, Assistant Director of Administrative Services, that during the year-end process, when you adopt the comprehensive annual financial report in December, the Finance Committee, and then the City Council approves the transfer of those encumbrances from the prior fiscal year to the new fiscal year. So that is a council-approved item, and many of those encumbrances, the large share of those encumbrances, different from the reappropriations. The encumbrances are actually for contracts and commitments that we still need to carry forward into the next year.
Yeah, I guess I traditionally have had trouble with that step of making that. So I think integrating it into our budget makes a lot of sense. But as long as it's clear as we move ahead. Yeah, please.
This is probably a dumb public sector newbie question, but the moving to reappropriate at the beginning of every year, that doesn't get anybody into one of these, you got to spend it or lose it kind of situations, does it?
No, it does not, because what happens is the way we're working with departments on the capital side, we ask them, what's the estimate you're going to spend by the rest of the fiscal year? And then we appropriate the balance forward, and then we can come back with a cleanup action. Let's say that there's still some money left, $50,000. We come back a second time to the council and reappropriate the rest. So really, they can keep the money in those projects for the purpose. It's just we're able to use those funds in that particular fiscal year. So we allow them several ways to carry it forward, and council to weigh in on that.
If I just might add, the majority of the time we're dealing with capital projects and that sort of thing. So it's actually the opposite of use it or lose it. The fact that it's actually going to be reappropriated actually guards against people rushing to try to spend stuff because they know that it's still going to be there.
Councilmember Niss.
So, Walter, just let me make sure I've got this right.
Microphone.
At the sales tax, which is 13 months, but we still have a substantial increase in the tax, even if you take away that 1.7, which is the increase for the sales tax. Am I correct?
That is correct.
So that must be 8 or 9%?
I have to look at that quickly.
I was just doing it, I wasn't doing it with a calculator, but somewhere in
That's
there.
okay. Sales tax.
1.3, around 1.3 million. That's other
I'm looking for a percent.
Oh, the percent.
It's about 6-7%.
Okay, so that's a pretty substantial increase, isn't it? In our sales tax? We're not watching it go up 6 or 7% every year, I don't think.
No, we're actually not. We're actually rather conservative, since there could always be ups and downs for sales tax. The other issue we had is that we just don't know. We're constantly watching what Joe's group does very well with a contractor. We're looking at the very deep level of sales tax, looking at the actual receipts of vendors which generate those, and with that, we're able to more predict in which parts, in the industrial groupings or sales tax groups, would generate more sales tax.
How much of that would you think is what we would call retail?
I will have to defer to Joe on this one.
So we did witness increases, decent increases in restaurant sales, miscellaneous retail. Most of this is, on retail sales, not, we obviously
Well,
don't.
then I'll call out the obvious. We have been very concerned, or you've heard from some how concerned they are about retail.
Right.
What I'm seeing sounds like a very robust retail indicator, which is sales tax. Am I correct, Joe?
Yes, we've seen good numbers on
Yeah.
sales tax in the retail.
So we're doing well in retail.
Yes.
Yeah, just
And
as
there are
in a word. Now, didn't I also read within the last 2 days that we're the city that is in this county that has the highest property tax, and I don't know whether they said per whatever,
Per capita.
per capita, which is, I don't know if that's a new, I don't know if that's a feather in our cap or not anyway, but because if I got started on Prop 13, I'd be here the rest of the night because I always think it's so unfair. But if we're looking at this, that says that as a community, we're really seeing very robust taxes in retail and in property tax, correct? Okay, I just want to put it out there so we really said, yes, that's an area where we're doing well.
And every city in the county is very, very jealous of Palo Alto, I can tell you that.
I know that, Walter, but not everyone else believes it. So yes, San Jose just, slathers at the thought of having what we have.
That is correct.
Let's see.
That's a very technical word.
A couple very quick questions about little things. You mentioned one new position in the attorney's office. I heard the other night someone said we just hired an extra enforcement officer, and I think I've heard elsewhere about positions. Is that really true that we have only one new position in the city to date?
We only have one new approved position, approved in a sense in the table of org, which we make the change here today. Sometimes we do hire overstrength positions. Council authorizes to hire up to 20 in the fiscal year. But otherwise, there's no other new positions in the city, unless there could be temporary positions, which we have as well. When we have vacancy savings in the department, we sometimes authorize a temporary positions to backfill a vacant position.
Okay, but I guess when the new budget comes, there will be a clear statement of new positions.
That is correct. So any kind of positions which the city manager recommends in his budget will come forward as part of the proposed budget process.
Okay. I was concerned of the number of people, workers' comp, I guess was up dramatically. Was it police or fire? And that was a function, had an impact on our overtime. And it raises a base question about the age structure. I guess we had talked a year or so ago about the fact that especially the fire department tends to have an older age structure. And I wondered if there's an association between workers' comp and our age structure.
Good evening, Eric Nickel, Fire Chief. Chair Schmidt, yes, that is correct. The older the departments get, there is some studies out there that do show a correlation with increased workers' comp injuries. And that's pretty true with all public safety in the public safety sector. I think when we reported to the Finance Committee on this matter maybe a year and a half ago, I want to say the average age of the department was probably 38 to 40 years old. As you know, we do have 40% of the department that is eligible to retire in the next 5 years. So, but if you do look at the very last page on attachment F, the work that Ian Hagerman did and the budget and finance team did here, we're actually about half the number of workers' comp cases that we had last year. So we're actually trending in the right direction for this year. The vacancy number that you're seeing comes from, we have 10 vacancies right now within the fire department, which has nothing to do with workers' comp.
Yeah, I think the police department showed up increase from last year. But again, just in the back of our minds, working on that age structure, you know, would be helpful. Documentary transfer tax went down during a period where there's, you know, a lot of activity going on. What's the cause of that now? My understanding is that a lot of documentary transfer tax.
What's the reason for it? So the number of transactions are down. We have, let's see here, we're down by almost 100 transactions through the current period from last year. And in addition to that, which is, let's see here, what did I put? What percentage? It's about 27%.
Is that because of a decline in residential building? Because I know our commercial building is very high.
Well, I think there, let me sort of walk through it. You know, the transactions are down, the dollar volumes are down as well by nearly 37%. So what that reveals to me is that large commercial transactions compared to last year are down because of the dollar change. We don't have information to parse out what's residential versus commercial. So it's difficult to say how many have gone down residential and how many have gone down commercial.
Yeah, it's just striking because we have such a boom in commercial growth at the moment, and yet that.
Yes, there is the possibility that there was one major transaction on the Page Mill property, the Palo Alto Square property, and we've been tracking that, but we can't say whether it's going to hit this year or next year, and that could be a very sizable amount. We should disclose that because before the end of the year, we might see that. This adjustment is based on what we're seeing year to date. If we knew better about that other large transaction, the adjustment would be higher. I mean, It would be pretty much in line with last year.
Okay, thank you. I noticed we talked a little bit about the gas fund, but the electric fund had a decline in reserves of $22 million, which is quite striking.
John Abendschein, Rates Manager. So we've definitely been seeing decreases with the electric utility that are related to the drought. I'd have to look at the exact section that you're referring to see how much of that decrease that you're referring to is related to adjustments in revenue that actually were just related to that coordination issue we were talking about before.
Yeah.
But there are some changes related to, and substantial changes related to the drought. Now, I'd say we have very substantial reserves in the electric utility, more than enough, and actually we'll be talking about it a little bit later.
Yeah, I think that's actually a question we can get into in the next item.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much.
Would you like a motion?
Yes, is there a motion?
Says that we adopt.
No, we recommend to the City Council.
I'm just reading through this. Which do you want? Oh, I'm sorry. Staff recommends. Is that what we would like? Staff recommends.
No,
that- which-
Finance Committee recommends.
Okay, sorry. Okay, let's go back up again. A motion to recommend to the council to adopt the mid-year budget amendment ordinance BAO for the proposed mid-year adjustments to the FY 2015 budget for the general fund, capital improvement projects funds, enterprise funds, special revenue funds, internal service funds as identified in attachment A and related exhibits. Got it.
Good.
Need a second?
Okay, motion by Councilmember Niss, seconded by Councilmember Filseth. Any discussion on that?
No. I think we've
Seconded.
discussed it well.
Okay, no further comments. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That passes unanimously.
one comment afterwards.
Please.
So it's sort of a nitpicky thing, but if you compare the item 1 staff report and the item 2 staff report, I'm getting older, I can't read this very easily. It's way too small type. This is much better type.
Get that guy a magnifying
So
glass.
whoever did the item 1 staff report, I much prefer. It's much easier to read. It's really tiny up here.
So your vote will be easier to get.
So, right, next time if I can't read it, I have to vote no.
That was actually just a test to see if the council was reading the packet, so.
Thank you very much for the presentation and for everyone who came to discuss item number 2. And let's move now to item number 1. Zero waste program plans and rate structure.
You know, Greg, what we might do, I just realized, because Eric is new, maybe as each one comes in, they could introduce themselves and say who they are.
Yeah, they do it when they speak. Should we do that up front?
Yeah, wouldn't that be good? And that way, they get, for example, I can't even remember the name of the woman walking out. Probably you can, but I can't.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you compost at your house?
Let's see. We're starting item number 2. Phil, maybe you could introduce the people before we start, so we have some new members on the Finance Committee.
Phil Boble, Public Works, sure. So Ron Arp is here with us, and he's actually going to be making the presentation. And Matt Krupp is sitting over there, and he did a lot of the work on this sort of long staff report of ours. So those are our 3 staff persons, all from Public Works.
Great, thank you. And if you want to kick it off.
Did you want to say something?
No, please.
So I'll kick it off. Again, Phil Boble, Public Works, Assistant Director for Environmental Services. And in half a second, I'm going to introduce Ron Arp, our zero waste manager, who's going to actually give a 20-minute, we've timed it, we'll keep it under 20 minutes, presentation. But what I wanted to do was just sort of apologize. We had hoped to be bringing this sort of large package to you earlier, and as you know, this is kind of your first meeting of the year, and we didn't kind of get on board and understand that that's what was going to happen. So we had wanted to give you a briefing on a number of program changes that we're proposing and tie that in to the rate that we'll be proposing on April 7th. So as you know, the rates for essentially all the utilities are going to come to you on April 7th, and the refuse is going to be one of those that you'll see. Tonight, we want to give you a briefing on the programs that result in part of the increase that we're recommending, explain to you how the balance between the commercial and residential is usually how we've described it, how that bears on our rate recommendation, and then just what is the rate recommendation that we're going to be making. So this gives you an opportunity tonight. You don't have to take any action, although we listed it as sort of accepting certain things. You actually don't have to take an action tonight. If you would prefer not to, that's absolutely fine. It's your chance to kind of be briefed on all of this ahead of the April 7th rate structure, so that you're not wondering on April 7th, well, why are some of these increases occurring? So we're going to describe the new programs and the program adjustments in some detail tonight.
So Phil, from what you say, you are not going to go to council before you come back to Finance Committee. So we are not recommending this to council.
Correct. We are going to go to council on one thing that we have to. And because we've kind of gotten pushed here, we had wanted more separation, but now we need to, on March 23rd, we need to go to the full council with one piece of this, which is the residential program change where residents will be allowed to put their compostable material, their food scraps, in with their green carts. Residents have been sort of clamoring for this, to be honest with you, ever since our pilot of over a year ago. And we'd like to respond to that on July 1st by having that program available. Backing up for that, we really need council to approve that on March 23rd. It's not an item that the Finance Committee really needs to approve. There's no reason why the Finance Committee, but we included it here so that you could see the whole picture, so that you didn't feel like, well, you're piecemealing me here. You're giving me rates, but not telling me what the programs are. Yeah. All right, so that's my little brief intro. I'm going to turn it over to Ron Arp, our Zero Waste Program Manager. He'll be supported by Matt Krupp, but we'll do a quick 20-minute presentation.
Hello, Ron Arp, Zero Waste Manager. We kind of went through this today. It may even be less than 15 minutes, so we want to give you plenty of time to ask questions. And so I'd like to preface before we start with the presentation on just kind of summarize the 4 big initiatives that we're going to be presenting here tonight. And 3 of these have to do with diversion-related activities and efficiencies of our program. And then 1, of course, as Phil mentioned, that has to do with the rates, the rate plan. So with that, so about 10 years ago, the city adopted a zero waste goal of 0 waste to landfills by 2021. So effectively, that means about 90%. That's effectively what we think that means. That would be diverted to the landfills by 2021. And it would have a greenhouse gas impact of about 7,300 metric tons per year. So to see how we're doing, if you look at this graph, we, in 2005, 2006, 2007, you could see we're kind of about 62% diversion. This is a graph of the diversion percentage. And then you see this spike up about 2009 and 10, which is when we implemented the green waste contract. And the green waste contract is a zero waste contract. We implemented commercial compostables collection, C&D, and that sort of thing. So you can see we spiked up to just about 80%, kind of where Phil's pointing the mouse there. And then since then, we've kind of leveled off, or even maybe dropped a little bit. We dropped probably because the economy's picked up and people are generating more waste out there. So this pie chart, we had a study, a waste characterization study, and this pie chart indicates, on average, what is in our garbage stream, what's in the black cart. And that's commercial and residential both. And as you can see, the slice kind of on the right there, roughly 40% of the waste that's in the garbage is compostable material. And that we can kind of loosely define as food scraps, food soiled paper, compostable plastics, and pizza boxes and things like that. So we view that as the greatest opportunity for diversion is to go after the city's commercial and residential compostable material. So that's what this plan is going to center around. I'm going to be kind of laying that out here. So we kind of looked at this, our plan as being kind of analogous to a 3-legged stool where the 38% compostable material in the garbage is equivalent roughly to about 12,000 tons of compostable material per year. And so we have really 3 different ways to go out and collect that material and process it and compost it. So the first leg on the left is the residential food scraps. So it's a residential sector. We're going after we'd like people to collect and place their food scraps and food soiled paper in the green cart with the yard trimmings. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. The second leg is a commercial compostables, and there's about 7,000 tons available in the commercial sector. And then finally, the third leg is the green waste contract amendments, and that would be what we would recommend that we approve a contract with a change in scope and extending the contract so that Green Waste can implement these other two legs and also increase efficiencies and purchase some, replace some of the older trucks that they purchased from Pasco originally. Okay, so first we'll talk about the residential program that we're recommending. And if you could see on this pie chart, so the residential sector is really loaded with compostable material. It's 50% of it is compostable. And actually the actual amount of garbage that can't be recovered is about a quarter of what's in the residential sector garbage carts. So 50%, that's roughly equivalent to about 5,000 tons per year. And what we're recommending is kind of what you see on this slide in red, which is to ask the residents to collect and sort their food scraps, food soiled paper, compostable plastics, pizza boxes, that sort of thing. Do not put it in the garbage like what they're doing now, or some people are putting it down the sink, or some people are home composting. But basically recover that material. Don't put it in the garbage where it'll mostly get landfilled, but put it in the green cart with the yard trimmings. It could be put in there in compostable bags or just loose, it doesn't matter. Main thing is just get it out of the garbage. And I don't mean physically put it in the garbage and take it out, but just don't let it go in there. So the next thing, as part of this program, we would be purchasing kitchen pails, giving it to everybody. And we'll be also purchasing, or at least developing outreach materials, stickers, some really good videos, training materials, and that sort of thing, and having training sessions to get the residential sector used to this program. And so why are we recommending it now? As Phil kind of mentioned that a little bit, there is a real high amount of public interest in this program. Everywhere we go, people are asking, why aren't we doing this? And there's several communities that have been doing that for a long time. Alameda County, north of us in San Mateo, they have programs going on. So we do think that we do believe that this is the time to do it. And we've done this recent pilot. It's pretty straightforward. There's facilities that do take this material, and we think this is a good time to do this program. We think it'll be fairly popular. As Phil mentioned, we do have a tight time frame, so we'll be going to council on March 23rd, asking for your approval. We need to do that in order to have time to purchase the food scrap pails, and also develop the advertising and the outreach, and make sure everything's in place so that we can begin collection on July 1st. That's our goal, and we'd really like to push for that. So we were talking about the residential program changes where we could capture that compostable material. So the second leg is the commercial sector, where there's an even greater amount of compostable material currently being landfilled. That's about 7,000 tons per year that's we've targeted to be diverted. And you can see this pie chart, it's still a very high amount of compostable material in the commercial sector. There's about 40%. And we think, and it's interesting to note that garbage is about 21%, the actual non-recoverable material. So we do have, so the way that we have planned to do this is to develop and implement a commercial recycling and composting ordinance. So that would kind of tie in somewhat to some of the recent cities that have done this. Seattle is kind of the most recent one, which we're kind of looking at, and it looks like a pretty similar program to the concepts that we've come up with. The way this would work is, currently there's about 30% of the commercial customers are subscribing to compostable service. So, and that's a voluntary program, and we're happy with it, but we think we need to go further than that. And 62%, so less than 2/3 of the food establishment businesses participate. So there's still, over another third there that we really think we could, if they did subscribe to service and sort properly, we think quite a bit of the waste, the material would be would be divertible. So of course, this ordinance would mean that these businesses, it would be mandatory that they would subscribe to the composting service, if they generate compostable materials. And so our timeline here, we've kind of developed concepts that we've already kind of looked at that and talked about it. We would go to the public and get some reactions and get some input from the public. And we think we could bring this together and pull it together by summer. Late summer is kind of the target date for that. And we would implement it, we'd recommend implementing this in phases. So we would, phase one would be the logical choice, the food service industry and large commercial customers. And then that would be by April of 2016. Phase 2 and 3 would follow after that, medium, and then all commercial customers in phase 3 there. So the third leg in this compostable stool, if you will, is amending the green waste agreement so that they could implement these programs that I've just talked about. And here's kind of a summary. This slide shows a summary of the green waste contract amendments. We've already had some informal meetings with them. And, the first one is to extend the contract term by 4 years through 2021. That kind of coincides with our other agreements. We think this is appropriate because, Green Waste is doing a good job. We're getting great feedback from the community. They're doing good. They're good partners with us. They have some good ideas here. They have the facilities that can do it. So that's one thing that we're recommending. The original agreement does allow for 4 years, and usually I think it says 1-year terms, but they do allow it to be extended up to 2021. And we're recommending in one lump kind of change there, change the term to 2021. So the biggest item, is the commercial compostables, is the compostables package, the $1.3 million that would be added to their contract per year. Also, and that's for not only implementing and collecting all this material, but those are monies that would be paid for them to take our material to their facility and then either anaerobically digest or right now they're composting it. We're also recommending that they do the commercial billing, and we could talk about that later. There's a lot of reasons why. And as I mentioned, to purchase some automated collection vehicles. There's actually a cost savings to doing that, and we can talk about that if you'd like. So the total cost impact, as I mentioned, was the $1.3 million, but there is some savings for redirecting the waste from the Smart Station Kirby Canyon facilities, so about $576,000. So the net increase, the net impact of these programs would be about $790,000. So it's a little less than 3% overall. 3% overall increase to our fiscal year 16 budget, or 15 budget, I'm sorry. And the Green Waste Amendment timeline, we think we could get it done fairly quickly. We've already kind of agreed with Green Waste and Concept. We think we could pull this together and go to council in May or June and get this done. Okay, so we have been talking about the, compostable material collection, these new programs, some efficiencies that we'd like to propose. Now we're going to talk about our 3-year plan to balance the residential sector's revenues and costs. And we're also recommending simplifying the bill structure and not showing the individual program fees on the bill. And just to note that the commercial sector, we would have at least another year of no rate increases, which would mean that they haven't had a rate increase since October 2010. This table shows our proposed 3-year plan. And you can see on the left side, the left column, you see the mini can, the 20-gallon, the 32-gallon. So that's the service size on the left. And just by way of example, I guess if we follow the mini can, the 20-gallon, to the right, the price now is $22.29, the fee, the monthly fee. And in 2016, it would go up 9%, which would be $24.36. and an 8% in the next 2 years, each of the next 2 years. It would be a cumulative increase of 28%. It should be noted that about 85% of residents have either the 32-gallon or the 20-gallon. And 28%, although it does sound like a large amount, just want to frame it as, for the mini can, it's $6.20. 3 years from now, for $6.20 additional, we can pay for the new zero-waste services and also balance the sector, the expenses with the revenues. And so the implementation schedule, as Phil mentioned, will be coming back to you on April 7th for rate adoption, council approval in June, and the new rates would be proposed to be implemented on July 1st.
So I'll jump back here and remind you what I was saying initially, that no action is really necessary or required by the Finance Committee tonight. So you'll see that our recommendations are with different verbs. So the first one we just discussed, which is what you're going to do in a minute. Discuss this residential change where people would be able to get their food scraps recycled or composted. And then secondly, you'd accept or just take no action on our recommendation with respect to the green waste contract, extending that contract and making the changes that Ron talked about. Thirdly, you'd accept or take no action on our concept of having a commercial compostable service be required, so that there'd be an ordinance for requiring commercial compost. And then lastly, our plan to develop a rate structure. Again, no action needed. That'll come back to you on April 7th. So that's just a summary. That's the same thing that appeared in the staff report. So with that, we'll end, and back to you.
Great, thank you very much. Exciting information.
It really is, yeah.
Council members, comments? Councilmember Sharp.
Well, I really appreciate the fact that we're moving in the direction of having a compostable plan. I mean, I think it is really annoying for people in Palo Alto. I guess first of all, to start with the big picture, I'm very concerned that you don't think we need to take action. Since I've been on finance, we take action on these things, and and there are a lot of financial implications on this stuff. And I don't understand why we wouldn't be taking action. I think it's a bad precedent. I don't understand why you would think we shouldn't either say yes or no.
I was just pointing out that you don't need to. There's no requirement that the Finance Committee act on these. Just pointing that out.
Well,
Guess you can if you want to.
Just to clarify, though, Councilmember Sharp, at some point, the committee and the council will approve the rates.
Yes, that's the April 7th for the Finance Committee, and then June for the council.
but at some point, council needs to approve all of these things. And the role of the committee is to go in depth on these things and then make a recommendation to council. And so I don't understand why you would not want the committee to not make a recommendation. Why even come here? Why not go directly to council then? I mean, if we're not going to say to council, the four of us, we either approve or disapprove of this, what's the point?
Well,
and we've
the
never
point
done
was-
that before, so I think it's silly.
Well, the point was to explain to you what the program changes are that are resulting in the rate structure. So when we were sort of getting this together at the staff level, it was one of these chicken or the egg things. Some of our people said, hey, you should tell them what these programs are. You should brief them on these programs, not just hit them with the rates. So that's what led us to do that. There's, like I say, no requirement that finance approve these individual programs. There is a requirement that council approve the green waste contract, and as Ron said, we'll be bringing that to council in the August timeframe. If you'd like us to bring that back to the Finance Committee, we can do that. We don't have the actual contract yet. We're just briefing you on the broad outlines of it. There's also, because it involves the budget and a BAO, this residential program needs council approval, and we'll be taking that to council on March 23rd. The ordinance requires council approval. Typically, that type of ordinance would not be going through the Finance Committee, but again, up to you. But that will go to council as well, the ordinance.
So I guess I want to understand the monetary impacts of this. The part that I was most interested in is understanding, where was it? I was looking for the costs. So somewhere over here, the 1.366 million. I was unclear in the staff report if that's caused by no longer going to the smart station and going to, is it ZBest? What's it called? ZBest?
The new one.
Right,
Yeah,
the new one.
the new one.
Is it
Z-WED is the new one.
So if we stuck with the smart station, would we in effect save $800,000? That was my question.
Well, no, we wouldn't save. We'd save the 576 that was on one of our slides. Can you find that slide again, Ron?
It's number 8.
So yes, it's number 8. That's what I'm looking at. Right.
Right. So we would, the green waste contract would increase by the 1,366,000, but the other contracts that we have with Smart and Kirby would decrease by the 576 because we're no longer taking the residential material there.
So 2 things on that. First of all, I actually asked the question, if we sent them all to the smart station and Kirby Canyon, what would be the increase in the green waste contract? Because the way it's written, if you look in the staff report, is it says 0 cost to implement this. It implies that the costs are all where we send it. And staff prefers to send it for ZWED to ZWED, but we obviously could send it to Kirby Canyon and the smart station. And the way the staff report's written, it implies that there's no cost, that's where all the costs are, is sending it to ZWED. So what I'm asking is if we stuck with sending it to smart station and Kirby Canyon, what would be the cost of the green waste contract increase?
Well, if we kept doing what we're doing now with the residential, one problem is that these figures are talking both about residential and commercial. So I'm not sure what part of the staff report we're referring to. Some parts of our staff report are talking about the residential program. Some parts are talking about the commercial program. This slide.
Turn to packet page 14.
You're back in the packet, not the presentation.
Yep, packet page 14. I read the staff report, and this is the way it's sort of laid out. It's laid out that extending the contract term by 4 years costs us nothing, that the new residential food scrap collection costs us nothing, but process the residential food yard trimmings as ZWED costs us $1,134,000, and then you go out and say basically somewhere that we have $570,000 of savings because we don't have to go to Smart and Kirby. So I'm assuming the difference between the 576 and the 1366 is the additional cost to send it to ZWED. And we could save that money by not going to the smart station, by not going to ZWED and sticking with smart station and Kirby. That was my question.
No, that upper figure is not just the cost of going to ZWED. The ZWED cost is relatively small compared, and we have that in the staff report. I think the difference was $81 a ton versus $75 or $76 a ton.
Right. I
So
saw that as well.
That's a small part of the total.
So then what is the difference in cost? Because obviously this is not the way the staff report's written. The staff report implies that it's sending it to ZWED.
So the big difference is that we're taking, right now, our commercial, our residential compostables are going to Kirby Canyon. They're being included in the garbage and they're going to Kirby Canyon. So the big change is they've now got to take it to, they've got to process it. They've got to take it to at least the ZVest, the
smart station.
Yeah, the smart station and on to the compost facility in Gilroy. At least they have to do that. And that's the biggest part of that change, I think, isn't it, Ron? So that's the biggest part of that
So what you're really
1.3
telling me
million.
is that it's minimal to be the difference between ZWED and Smart Station?
It's not a big difference. The ZWED thing is not a big difference.
Okay, because that was really my question, is what's the
Okay.
difference between the two?
Yeah, and one thing that might have confused you, I think Jim read you an announcement that our commercial stuff is going to ZWED effective Monday. And so remember, this cost increase that I'm talking about is the residential increase. It's very confusing because our commercial stuff is already collected and at least it's composted. And effective Monday, it not only was composted, but we're extracting the energy from a dry anaerobic digester in North San Jose. That's what's called ZWED. So our commercial stuff, effective Monday, is already going to that facility, so it's a little bit confusing. The residential stuff is currently being landfilled, so that's a big difference to the difference between being landfilled and having some kind of processing to it. Anything we do to it is going to cost substantially more. So that's the biggest hunk of that 1.3 million.
And you're telling me there's $576,000 in savings by not going to Smart Station or Kirby Canyon?
Right, with the commercial, I mean the residential stuff.
Last time I looked at this, it was a couple years ago, we had contracts with Kirby Canyon that we had to spend, pay no matter, a certain amount of money to Kirby Canyon no matter what. We weren't actually using it all then. And since our waste hasn't gone up, I assume we're still paying Kirby Canyon not to deliver. So there can't be any savings for Kirby Canyon.
Good news that we have essentially eliminated the put and pay requirement at Kirby Canyon.
That is
and
good.
you may remember that. So yes, if it weren't for that, you wouldn't see that savings at Kirby. But we had very good success renegotiating the contract with Waste Management about 2 years ago. So less than that. And so that put and pay requirement has essentially gone away. It's being phased out, but yeah.
That's really good news. Okay. Those were my major concerns about the way this was written. Let's see. I am concerned about the rate increases, frankly. They seem like a lot. They really do, on a percentage basis. So, I'm concerned that we're going forward with gas rates are going up, and this goes into the next thing, water rates are going up, and garbage rates are going up. It's just, and I'm concerned, I would like to know, is there any other possibilities to slow this down a little bit? Push it over maybe 4 years instead of 3 years? It just seems like these are large increases. They're,
Well, that's always possible. It's always possible to extend this out a bit. The advice we're getting was to try to balance the residential expenditures and the residential revenue as soon as we can. And we didn't do that in 2012, although we started the process. We didn't continue it because we could see at that point in time that our model and our estimates were off, and we'd be overdoing it if we'd used the data we had in 2012. We would have actually had a lot higher percentage increases than you're seeing here. So we've spent almost 3 years sharpening our pencils, reallocating where we could, getting this number down. And so we came back to you now with the same kind of proposal, which is 3 years, which are what the experts are telling us we really ought to do. I would just point out that although it looks bad, 28%, just repeating what Ron says, over 3 years, 28%, that's really only a $6 a month increase for the mini can people, even the next size up. And remember, over 80% of our customers are in one of these two upper categories. So even the 30-gallon can is only, over 3 years, an $11 increase. Each year is roughly a third of that. So, yeah, $4, well, $4 a month for any particular year. So we could show you a slide of the other utilities projected increases, but I'd be stealing John's thunder if I did that. But you know, you've got 0 in electric, you've got 0 in gas, and a substantial number in wastewater.
Well, I think
for 2016.
We can talk about that later, but my recollection is we only have 0 in electricity right now because we're not trying to, that those rate increases will eventually be coming. Okay, I just wanted to say I am concerned about the overall rates. And so the other thing I'm concerned about is the ordinance requiring commercial users to do this. And it's not what we think of commercial. What I read in the staff report, and maybe I got it wrong, was that we're requiring people who live in, frankly, large apartments, or any apartments, because apartments are considered to be commercial use. And I was concerned about the way the enforcement was that it was a little unclear to me who gets fined. It basically says that, you know, they have a big dumpster, as far as I can tell. You know, that's how these commercial things work. Different people in different apartments or other people walk by, stick things in it. It's one thing if you're a business and you can control it. It was completely unclear to me how these open dumpsters, of which anyone can drive in and throw in, you know, stuff inappropriately. So I thought we should exclude apartments, frankly. If we're not going to impose this on people living in single-family houses, why should we discriminate against our renters? That was really what I was thinking.
So that's a good comment. We were kind of struggling with how to do this. We're really not, in concept, we're not really going to go after people aggressively on the first time or second time. We're going to kind of give them what a lot of jurisdictions do when they have these, they go back 3 times. We send somebody out, if there's a problem, we'll send somebody out to see if they need training or something like that.
So I understand that, I appreciate that, but on the other hand, I believe in the rule of law, and I don't like the idea that if we have laws, we should enforce them. We shouldn't say, well, we're going to take a light hand on it, and so therefore it's okay. And I'm just saying I think it's unfair.
One thing, maybe I just mentioned also for the apartments, one thing that we were considering is to find out, or at least considering is, do we want to specifically include the multifamily, apartments as a special status so that all residents could collect and have a place to put their food scraps. So that's something that, I think there's a large amount of interest there. So if we did, put the umbrella of a commercial ordinance around a multifamily, then we could consider some, different status on them. But they're kind of in between a residential and
I'm obviously fine
commercial.
with them having the opportunity to do it. I think that's great. We want to encourage it. I just have an issue with having having some sort of enforcement mechanism that makes it mandatory. I mean, obviously, like with residential, we're giving people the opportunity, but we're not going to their houses and fining them if they don't do it. And so I'm saying we just should treat our renters the same we treat our single family.
That's a good point. Let us look back at that. That makes a lot of sense, Councilmember Sharp. And I think we need to look at how we treat multifamily, because you're right, we don't want to set up a difference between multifamily and single family in that way. So we'll take a hard look at that, and I think you'll be happy with what we come back to you on.
I appreciate it.
Let me just say one other thing. You used the word fine. We're thinking that it makes more sense and is actually justified to call it a fee if we get to that point. And like Ron says, we've warned somebody several times, then we're thinking we'd impose a fee. And the fee would be because we have to make a special effort now to take their stuff to a landfill and extract it from other people's stuff, and that there's a cost associated with our staff working in actually doing that it's a justifiable fee. So I think we'd call it a fee, not a fine.
And I'm almost done. One last question was the pails. Is this the same thing that everyone else is doing in other cities? You said a lot of other cities do this. I mean, I'm just curious about smells and, those kind of things. I mean, they said rotting food and that kind of stuff all in the pail and keep it in the house,
And they don't have to use our pail. They don't have to keep it in the house. They can make their own decision about exactly how to manage it. They can either put it in a bag or put it in loose. So we're trying to be as flexible. They could put it in a milk container. That's what I've done. So we're trying to be completely flexible.
I just want to know what other cities are doing.
Oh, what other cities are doing? Well, the north of us, yes, they have same kind of system. And in Alameda County, they have the same kind of system. South of us, they don't. San Jose and the southern cities south of us do not have this program.
Yeah,
I think
comment?
Matt has a comment.
Yeah, hi, Matt Krupp with Public Works Zero Waste. Our research has indicated, and all the evidence shows, that giving away these kitchen pails or buckets helps improve the participation amongst the residents. So it's something that we felt is essential to the program. In addition, on our website, for the pilot, we offered best management practices for people within their houses on where to store these kitchen buckets. A place not to store them would be underneath your sink in a very humid, damp environment. It's a good place to increase your fruit fly production if you want to do that. But we have a bunch of best practices for people on where they can put the kitchen buckets and pails, so as it doesn't smell in your house and it becomes a very convenient part of your day-to-day activities, managing your waste.
All right, well, thank you for that explanation.
Councilmember Niss.
I suppose that there's an option of keeping them in your basement if you have one. I want to go down a really different track from what Councilmember Scharf has done, which I appreciate, and I know you've been tracking this garbage for quite a while. And I've never sat on any governing body that wasn't fascinated by garbage and what it costs and what it means in the community and so forth. For some reason, it has brought whole governments down, as you know, which I presume this won't happen here. But I want to ask about the culture of this, which sounds so simple. You know, just get this nice kitchen pail and you put all your scraps in it. So you did in your report, you talked about what you did in Green Meadow, and you said that wasn't very successful, but there were lots of lessons learned. Do you want to just talk about that for a minute? I'm also interested in knowing, is there a market for compost? And what then happens to this compost, those grounds and the banana peels and everything else we've so carefully saved? And I know my daughter lives north of us and they do compost.
So I'll ask Matt to give a quick synopsis of the pilot. But there is a market for food waste compost. Much of it goes for landscaping, but it's still a valuable, commodity that's used in landscaping. Some of it goes to non-root crop, from what I understand, non-root crops. Most of it goes for agricultural or landscaping use. So.
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, the pilot actually was quite successful in a lot of ways. So we were able to see real diversion from that pilot and get a lot of food scraps out of the garbage. What didn't work primarily was relying on bags, compostable bags and plastic bags, to act as the separating agent, to keep the recyclables separate from the trash and to keep the food scraps separate from the yard trimmings. That wasn't effective. It didn't work generally in terms of being able to separate it on the floor of the material recovery facility. And also our residents expressed an immense displeasure with having to go buy more bags. It also is contradictory towards our other policies where we're trying to reduce plastic bag consumption in our stores with our single-use plastic bag ban ordinance. So that's one of the reasons that it didn't work. Nevertheless, we think that this will work in that residents will find the easiest way, like your daughter up north, that she can, you could take your loose food scraps, you could put it either directly into the green cart, you could put it into your kitchen scrap bucket, you could put it into, as Phil was saying, a carton or some newspaper. It's just a lot easier to deal with this way. And it's consistent with the other programs around the Bay Area, so people understand, they have an intuitive understanding of it. It's also consistent with our commercial program. So kids who go to school in Palo Alto, they do one thing, and then they come home and they have to do something different right now. We want to make it so you do the same thing, whether you're in a business or whether you're at home.
So what we're saying is the learning is going to be learning to put your scraps and so forth in with your green waste.
Right.
And I think that is going to be, it's going to be somewhat difficult initially.
Absolutely. We're putting together.
It seems contradictory to what we have tried to do before.
We're putting out a big outreach effort to make sure that our residents understand what goes where. We're also hoping to have outreach that consistently reinforces these messages. It does help that our neighbors to the north, some of our neighbors to the south, and our neighbors to the east all do this. So people are hearing these messages around the region. So as more and more cities start to compost their food scraps, then it becomes sort of a normal de facto way of going about your business. And people come here, this is, Ron alluded to it, people talk to us at events, special events, call us all the time saying, hey, when are you going to do this? When are you going to get food scrap composting? We're like, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And people expect it to be here and are surprised that it's not. So we were the exception right now, and we're hoping to join the rule.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I think that the other message is that it is really good for the environment. It's just that simple. And I might worry somewhat about the rates, Greg, but I'm frankly more worried about what we do with the environment, and know that that compost is being reused. However it gets to the whomever is going to use it is terrific. Now, some people, I realize, are able to compost it at their home. They do it effectively and so forth. I'm probably not going to do that, but I'm delighted to know that food scraps and so forth will actually go into compost that eventually does go back into the soil. And I hope that's what we're going to concentrate on with this. It's taken a long time to get to this point. And Phil, I know you have worked on this for years. And to have it get to this point is really important. And that's the message I'd really like to see go out to the public, that we've gotten our act together. We are matching what other cities are doing close by. And we will have that kind of ordinance in place. So I'm not discounting your concern with the rates, but I really do feel a very strong,
So Councilmember Niss, I just have to interrupt you. It's not my concern over the composting. I think we need to do that.
Okay,
I
great.
just think you're implying
So-
that it is. My concern is with the rate structure.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
my concern is with I think we should spread it out over 4 years, not 3 probably.
Well, that may work. But I remember, and I'll bet you do too, many years ago, somebody wrote a book called If You Want to Save Your Environment, Start at Home. And that was one of the things in that little booklet years ago. So, sorry, Greg, I didn't mean to misunderstand your good intent.
And just to add to Greg's thought, is that most of that rate increase is not related to this residential composting or to commercial composting. It's this trying to achieve this balance between the cost and the revenue of the residential sector, which is what we're being advised we should do as soon as possible. But it's your choice, and we could extend that out to 4 years, and it would have a little less impact.
And I hope at some point we, in some way, will make it known to our constituents that there are ways to go and see these different facilities. And my trip through Green Waste was absolutely fascinating. And the same with any of these others that we go to. It's great for kids. And I think Green Waste takes, honest to God, reservations, as I recall. Am I correct?
I'm not sure, but I think they do have a great facility, as you know, and we do have Green Waste here if we can get a quick answer.
Somebody came from Green Waste?
Well, the question was tours of the facility.
Right.
Yeah, tours of the
How do they set that up?
Yeah, if you could introduce yourself.
I'm Scott Schultz from Green Waste, the outreach manager. We do provide tours of all the facilities on request, so they would come through via email from me to the public and also council members and anybody interested. And it takes some coordination, especially at the new facility. But yeah, we provide tours.
And someone could just email us and we'll get it on, since you don't have his email address, just any one of us, and we'll get it connected up.
So maybe city manager or the mayor can weave that into her newsletter or something like that. But I was really fascinated by the tour we took at Green Waste. And we brought a lot of people there, you know, from time to time. It's I hate mentioning that garbage is intriguing, but it's pretty fascinating to see the way that that your facility operates.
That's a great idea, Councilmember Niss. We'll publicize that.
We'll publicize garbage tours, right?
Right.
Right.
And we're happy to do it.
Councilmember Filson?
I just wanted to ask briefly about the rate structure as well. I think several times in the package it mentions rebalancing between residential and commercial on this, and probably everybody's heard this before, but could you just do the 20 seconds of color on what exactly that means?
Let me try to start it, Ron. So we're not in balance between our residential revenues and expenditures. The residential expenditures are greater than the residential revenues. The entire fund has been in good shape for the last couple of years. We've actually been able to increase the reserves. So that is, for the entire fund, commercial and residential together, we've had a net revenue that we've applied and increased the reserves. But if you look at it just sector by sector, as we also have to do, then you look at the residential sector, they haven't been carrying their load. So the increases that we're suggesting in the residential are so that the residential increase, the residential revenue will match the revenue, match their costs over a 3-year period. We can't do that immediately because then you'd see a 28% increase in 1 year, which is totally unacceptable, we felt. So we suggested doing it over 3 years. Councilmember Scharf is suggesting you could even extend that out, which is true.
So the implication then, I assume, is that basically the commercial side is subsidizing the residential side on this?
That's correct.
So are the commercial rates going to fall if the residential side revenues and costs balance?
The commercial will not have to increase, is what we're suggesting.
I see.
At least next year. Now, as we get closer to balancing it, what happens, of course, is the commercial is larger than the residential.
Right.
So we've got to have a CPI increase for the commercial starting 2017, we think. Okay. I think that's what we've said, right, Ron? So probably, we're still sort of working on that, but okay. we can't have the commercial get out of whack over this either, and they're the bigger animal of the two.
So am I reading this right? So if I ask sort of how big is the subsidy from the commercial side to the residential side, is 1.36 million the answer?
No, it's not the 1.366 we had up there. Okay. That's not related.
Okay, so the whole Green Waste contract is like $28 million a year or something like that?
No, the Green Waste is a little over 14 million.
14, okay.
Yeah, the whole fund is, 29 million in expenses. So the subsidy, if you want to call it that,
just
is
how big?
Right? The shortfall, if you would call, I'd like to call it that, the shortfall in the residential sector is about 1.5 to 2 million right now.
Okay, and so that'll be in balance by the end of the 3 years?
Right.
Okay, thanks very much.
Just a couple quick comments. I guess the appropriate balance, I was struck on page 19 of the report where you said a year ago or a couple years ago you were looking at a number of programs where a greater percentage of costs should properly be allocated to commercial and roll-off sectors. Most significant was relative to the landfill closure. Now, I guess you've had a cost of services study since then that has given you some hard data to look at, but I think that cost of services study is not available, is it? I mean, that should be something.
Not quite. We'll get that. We wanted, it's a chicken or egg thing. We wanted to see what your reaction was tonight before we had the consultant finalize it, and then have no money to revise it. So,
yeah, I guess it would have been helpful to, before you present some fee increases, that you have the cost of services studies would justify the way you've allocated them.
Understood. And we're going to get that done and available to you well ahead of the April 7th meeting.
Good. You're putting a single charge on the black cart. No individual program fees on the bill anymore, just the black cart. And you estimate that there might be a 5% cost shifting that takes place. Now, I guess that is tough to accept, because your intention is to get half of the garbage out of the black cart into the green cart. So if people are moving half their garbage out of the black cart, say a 32 gallon, they'd go to the 20 gallon. So I would anticipate that you'd have quite a drop. I think we've seen this before. You could have quite a drop in revenues.
Well, we've accounted for a 5% migration. It's a, downsizing to smaller carts to save money. So our model, our rate model, has accounted for that, and so we'll come up with the right amount of money, even if 5% of people migrate. So if more people, we think we're kind of fully migrated. We have a very high percentage of mini cans in Palo Alto compared to other places. So if there is more, then we'll have to look at it for year to year.
Yeah, it just seems as though if you're asking people to take 50% out of the black carts that they have now, that they're going to have. Yeah, further comment?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add to that is sometimes the 50% can be a little bit deceiving because we're looking at weights and not necessarily volume. So food scraps tend to have a lot of weight and not necessarily a lot of volume, whereas the other garbage tends to have a lot of volume and not a lot of weight. So you might be able to still fill up your mini can or your 32 can, but a lot of material can still go over to the green cart. So it's not necessarily a direct one-to-one correspondence between the volume size of your cart and what you shift over. And as Ron said, our consultants have looked at other cities relative to our city, and we have a really high mini can rate right now, and they didn't project a larger migration down.
Okay. As long as you've looked at that seriously and do have some.
Well, we tried, but as you say, that 5% it's an estimate. The other thing, Councilmember Schmidt, is that we don't expect 100% sort of compliance. In fact, we're only assuming that we'll recover about 3,000 tons per year of the 5,000 tons. So although you're right, it's 50% of the total, not everybody's going to take advantage of this. Some people aren't going to change at all.
Yeah.
And others will put some of their food scraps in, but not all. So.
Yeah. Okay. Question on reserves. You say you want to buy the pails up front, dollar figure, but the refuse fund has a negative reserve at the moment. So how do you make an investment in the future with negative reserves?
Well, we don't have to take this money out of the reserves. Thanks to good work by Ron and his group, we've been having revenues exceed expenses for the last several years now. So we can afford to do this and still, if you're talking about buying the pails and the other stuff for that 349,000 or whatever it was, we're sure we can take the money out of this year's budget and not have a negative year.
Okay. Inside the current budget.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. The green waste contract, you want to extend it for 4 years. And I guess I couldn't have a conversation without bringing up my favorite long-term issue, plasma gasification. Now, I had always thought the end of the green waste contract might be an opportunity time to look at other technologies. And I know the original zero waste program was to get to advanced technologies by 2021. I do note that Westinghouse Plasma Corp. has just signed a contract to build a large waste-to-energy plant in the Teesside. It's going to power 100,000 homes. Now, by extending the green waste contract, we are, buying, that's 7 years, 6 years.
4 additional years.
Well, it's 4 years more, but it's 4 years beyond 2017. I guess I'm concerned. I know there's an aggressive push in Los Angeles County to be looking for new technologies, especially ones that can deal with two problems. The landfill problem, the greenhouse gas with that, and new sources of recoverable energy. And I would just ask the question, is this green waste contract written in a way that if options are available to us and our neighbors, we can take advantage of them?
Well, here's our big problem. It's not really the green waste contract, it's the SMART contract and the Kirby contract. So those other two end in 2021. So actually what we're trying to do is align all of these contracts ending in 2021. That's really the best we can do. Yeah. The main thing tying our hands, frankly, is the SMART contract with Sunnyvale and Mountain View, and it goes to 2021. So we're not going to be able to frankly, take advantage of any major new technology like you're describing until 2021. So we think we're actually just aligning all three of these things to now end in 2021, and starting like 2019, a couple years ahead of that, maybe even 3 years ahead of that, we need to start a new process, look at all the new technologies, figure out what kind of process we're going to use to go back out to the private sector and look for opportunities and proposals. But we can't do that until the smart station contract.
I guess I'm just concerned that we're building up a very complicated and dense infrastructure with a lot of parties who have a vested interest in keeping it the way it is, with 20% of our waste going to landfill, which is the toughest problem to deal with. Comment?
Yeah, I just want to add to what Phil said. You're all, well, most of you are familiar with our energy compost facility discussion and then the compost facility discussion after that. One of the reasons that we were able to have that discussion about yard trimmings and food scraps potentially being diverted to a Palo Alto facility is that we control the destiny of that particular material. It's not bound by the Smart Station contract or even the Green Waste contract. Garbage, however, at municipal solid waste, which is what Phil was talking about, is connected to the Smart Station, and that we have to, under contract, send that to the Smart Station, municipal solid waste, garbage, through 2021. Our hands are fully tied with that. But the other materials, the yard trimmings and food scraps, that material, we, as the city, can direct where that material goes, which is what allowed us to have that conversation about the energy compost facility and the compost facility.
Yeah. I guess the valuable thing would be to be talking with our neighbors at the Smart Station and saying, gee, this is an ideal location to think about a regional solution that would help everybody. And so you want to make sure that we are flexible enough moving into that discussion period.
And we are doing that. Ron's our main contact with the two other cities, but we've even gone beyond that. At your direction, full council, we've been talking to all of our nearby cities about what we could do together. And the main problem we're having is that they're all on different schedules with their current contracts. And that really makes it difficult. But rest assured that we are meeting with them. We met with Los Altos Hills and East Palo Alto most recently, and we continue with that dialogue with all of our near neighbors, not just the Smart Station partners.
Okay, I guess thank you for your input. And are there any last comments or motions from council members?
So I'll make a motion that we approve the staff recommendation. Sorry, I turned it off. That we approve the staff recommendations 1 through 3. I mean, I don't think we need to do 4 because you're going to come back on the rates to us. And I guess I'd like to add in number 4 that you come back with any options that are possible in looking at maybe having lower rate increases. I mean, I'm not saying we should do those, but I'd like to know what the options are. And in terms, and obviously we want to go ahead and do the composting. I'm thinking of the rebalancing and maybe doing 4 years or maybe 5 years or maybe it's 3 years, but some sense of that.
Will do. And let me just thank Councilmember Sharp for serving on the county waste reduction recycling group.
Right.
I don't know if that's started yet, their first meeting.
So my first meeting is coming up.
Thank you so much for, it's important for us to have that voice in that county-wide organization, so thank you.
Sure. I need a second.
I had understood we didn't need to vote, but
Yeah,
voting is, what a good idea.
shows enthusiasm.
Great enthusiasm, right. Right, and I hadn't realized you joined the county, what is it called now?
Recycling and Waste Reduction Committee. Commission.
Commission. I think
So I'm
they-
now a Waste and Recycling Commissioner.
I think they pay you for going. I do.
Well, that's great to know, Liz. I have no idea.
Any further comments on the motion?
No, no further.
Comments on your second?
None.
Councilmember Pilson. Okay, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That passes unanimously.
Yeah, that's to be a habit.
Thank you very much. And let's move
You look
then
shocked.
to item number 3, preliminary financial forecast and rate changes for electric, gas, and wastewater collection. Val, if you want to introduce yourself and your colleagues to the new council members as you.
Thank you very much, Chair Schmidt, members of the committee. I have with me, and my name is Valerie Fong, I'm the Utilities Director, and I have with me Resource Planner Eric Keniston, Senior Resource Planner, or also known as our Rates Manager, John Aubenschein, and I'd like to acknowledge that we have Utilities Advisory Commissioner Stephen Eglash here. Yeah, we have, just in the interest of full acknowledgement of other utility staff here, we also have our communications manager, Catherine Elvert, who is helping communicate the various rate changes that we're going to put forward to you tonight, proposed. Also, Assistant Director Jane Ratchey, this is her team, and our budget manager, Administrative Services, something or other. I forgot your title. Senior Management Analyst, Dave Yen, who is really our budget guy.
Now, let's see, just for the process, you have, I guess, a number of presentations. You'll have an overview and then each one of the utilities, and we can ask the Utility Advisory Commission to make a statement as well. Would you like to have council comments after each one of the presentations or at the end?
Yeah, we thought it might be most efficient if we gave the overview, and then we went into each utility, and after each utility, we took any questions and responded to them.
Good, okay. Please.
Okay. Good evening, council members. I'm John Abenshine, Senior Resource Planner, the Utilities Resource Management Division, and I'm here to talk to you tonight about our preliminary rate projections for next year and what we're projecting, our proposal for the next year, and what we're projecting for the next few years. This is an informational item and no action is required, but we've had a lot of success in previous years getting comments from all of you before we bring our final rate proposals. So we'll use whatever we hear from you tonight to inform our proposals April 7th and April 21st. We have a lot of slides, and in the interest of time, we're not going to try and go through every slide. We're just going to hit the key points for each utility. I'm going to give you a little overview of all of the utilities before we get started. And then if you have questions about anything that we've given you in the presentation, feel free to ask us. So here are our rate projections for the next few years. If you had the opportunity to see what we presented to the Utilities Advisory Commission, you'll note that they're different. We've changed our recommendations for the water utility and the gas utility. After we had our meeting with the UAC in February, we received an updated wholesale rate forecast from our water wholesale water provider, the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. And they informed us that rather than a 15% increase in the wholesale water rates, we could expect a 30% increase next year, or in July. So we'll be talking a little more about that when we get into the water utility in a little more depth. We have a little bit of flexibility in what we do with the gas utility, so we're proposing to not have a rate increase this year. We also heard some feedback from the UAC about taking a look at flexibility in various utilities. So we're pushing that back to next year and proposing a 7% rate increase next year. We did take a look at other utilities to see if or the wastewater specifically, to see if there was any flexibility with that utility, and we struggled to find any scenario that worked well with anything less than a 9% rate increase. So I'll just start by giving you an overview of what's happening with all of the utilities here. And before I do, I just want to remind everybody, you may or may not remember that last year we were able to hold the line on water rates. Hold the line on all rates. And the year before that, we were able to hold the line on all rates except water. Costs have been increasing over the last few years, and we're expecting them to continue to increase in the future. And we need to raise revenues to meet those obligations. Most of the cost increases that we're looking at over the next few years are related to contractual obligations with our suppliers. And for example, with the electric utility, we have renewable contracts that we've signed to fulfill our carbon neutral objectives. And those are coming online over the next few years. With the gas utility, we're seeing increases in the cost of transporting gas across PG&E's transmission system. We track those proceedings that allocate those costs, and we intervene in them, but some costs are inevitably allocated to transmission customers like us. A lot more are allocated to their customers, but that's what we're seeing with gas. With the wastewater, with the sewer utility, we're seeing increases that are associated with rehabilitation we're doing to our aging wastewater treatment plant and improvements that we're making to make it more environmentally sound. And those increases are being passed on to Palo Alto customers, as well as customers of in all the communities that are served by that treatment plant. And then lastly, there's water. And as all of you, I think, are familiar with, over the last, we're in the middle of a major seismic rehabilitation of the Hetch Hetchy water system. And each year, new debt is issued to continue the next phase of that project, and that translates into our wholesale water rates. So we'll get into that a little bit more when I talk about the water utility, but as you can imagine, we have contractual obligations to our suppliers, and what that means is if we aren't able to raise revenues to cover those costs and all of our operations and maintenance and investment and capital investment costs, inevitably, unless we raise those revenues, either O&M or capital investment has to be cut back. And I think in the past, when we've been faced with cost increases, we've done an exemplary job of continuing our capital investment and operations and maintenance programs. And this forecast recommends that we continue to do that. That's definitely something that other agencies cut back on and have cut back on, and we've done a good job of keeping up with our capital investment. I want to make sure with the increases that we're looking at here over the next few years, communications is really critical. We have our communications manager here if you have questions. We have a handout in the back. I'm not sure that it's made it up to you, but that outlines our communications plan, the people that we'd like to reach out to, and the type of message that we're trying to get across. So please, if we haven't gotten that to you yet, we'll make sure to get it to you. We're working on a set of frequently asked questions that we're going to try and get up in the next week or so, and we'll make sure that you have that link available in case you have questions from constituents. And we're really going to be targeting our outreach around in April and May, when the Prop 218 notices go out for these water and wastewater increases, and then again in July when people start to see them on their bills. So, and we're trying to, of course, especially with water, there is an impact both from the drought and from water rate increases on how people approach their landscaping. We are trying to coordinate with Canopy and other and the gardening community on trying to make sure that when we put out communications, we give people some help on how to maintain their the most high value landscaping, trees and other high value landscaping in the city through drought and rate increases. So that's my overview. Before I jump into the electric utility, I think we have a...
Yeah, I think there are some general comments from the Utility Advisory Commissioner Eglash. Welcome.
Good, thank you. Is this on? It is on. Hi, I'm Steve Eglash. I'm a member of the Utilities Advisory Commission. As you all know, the UAC advises the City Council on matters related to electric, gas, water, wastewater utilities, and other items that you might turn to us for from time to time, like things related to fiber. It's a bit unusual for me or one of my colleagues to come, but this is a bit of an unusual situation. As you just heard in the preliminary comments, there's been some changes in the information that you're going to be presented tonight since the most recent UAC meeting, and so I just wanted to take a minute to explain that from our point of view. At the February 4th Utilities Advisory Commission meeting, we received a presentation from utility staff very similar to the presentations you're about to receive on their preliminary financial forecasts and recommended rate changes. And we had the normal sort of discussion, and that's all documented in our draft minutes that I believe are part of your package for tonight. Subsequent to that UAC meeting, as you just heard, there was a substantial increase from our water supplier, the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission. And so the rates that are being recommended to you tonight by the utility staff are rates that the utilities Advisory Commission hasn't had a chance to discuss as a commission. We simply haven't had another meeting since that rate increase occurred. The Director of Utilities, Director Fong, informed all of us of the information from the SFPUC, and she informed us of the rates that you're being presented this evening. I can't speak on behalf of the whole commission. We haven't had another meeting as a commission in the last couple of weeks. Speaking for myself, I think the presentation that you're about to get from the utility staff is a reasonable response to the change in information that they were presented with a couple weeks ago. And so I personally have no qualms at all with the process or the particular recommendations that you're getting. I have no reason to think any of my fellow commissioners do either. And I'll be here tonight if I can be of any further use to any of you as the discussion goes on. But I didn't want to in any way take anything away from the fine presentations that you're about to receive.
I just have one question for Steve.
Please.
So you don't feel that it needs to go back to the UAC?
None at all, none whatsoever. I have no concerns.
Great, thanks.
Thanks very much for your participation tonight and coming out.
You're welcome, my pleasure.
Just clarify.
We will be taking these proposals back to the UAC, actually. They'll be hearing it, water and wastewater tomorrow night, and then electric and gas in April.
Right. The process is one that you're familiar with, in fact, from some of your earlier agenda items tonight, where utility staff has found it helpful over time to come to the commission prior to needing an action for a preliminary discussion, and then subsequently for action.
If you want to kick it off.
Absolutely. So why don't we start with the electric utility? We're not proposing a rate increase in July. We are planning to do an increase, or we're projecting we're going to need to do an increase in FY17 and FY18. And again, that's associated with the increases in renewable energy costs, as well as some increase in transmission costs. I think it's worthwhile to remind, just to make sure it's said that we ratepayers, even with these couple of increases, still get a great deal from their electric utility. We haven't increased rates since July 1st, 2009. In that time, PG&E had I think an 11% or 8% increase in FY11 and 3 to 4% increases since then, and another couple of 3 to 4% increases in the future. The drought is definitely affecting our reserves. We're planning to propose an $11 million drawdown of our hydro stabilization reserve, which would leave it at $17 million. That's part of the reason that we have those reserves, and we're comfortable that we're well above our risk assessment level. That's the red line there. And we expect to stay that way even if the drought continues through the next winter. So with that, I'll try and be brief and just open it up to questions.
Good. Council questions? If there
Can I ask a question on the slide, the previous slide? Yeah, the reserve from now through 2021 or something like that increases like 73%, if I read this right. Why is that?
So I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to go back even to a slightly previous slide here. So the increase in that one particular reserve is, I think on a percentage basis, I think the increase is large, but that reserve is only one of many for the electric utility. What we're trying to do here is we have minimum and maximums for that operations reserve. We're trying to get it back to the target level, which is in line with 90 days of operations and commodity expenses, which is a good rule of thumb for financial management. It's what our
It also matches your rate increases.
yeah, and a lot the way that we get back to this target is with those rate increases. So
And so it's at the lower bound now. Is that because of what we saw on the previous slide as you drew down the reserve?
that's correct.
Okay.
Let me follow up on that. I guess if you take the supply reserves, slide 9, and add them to reserve adequacy, you have $22 million drop in reserves. Is that right?
That's correct, and some of that is expected. We have higher reserves than, we've made some changes to our reserve structure in the last couple of years, but when we were operating with just a rate stabilization reserve, we had an upper boundary on that we prefer not to go over. We were skating along that upper boundary, and so we've set our rate trajectory to try and draw down those reserves a little bit.
So the use of reserves is because of conservation? People stop buying water?
It's not so much. Actually, our electric, our conservation and new PV installations pretty much offsets our load growth. So we have a very flat load.
Is it from the need to move away from hydro?
It's not necessarily a need to move away from hydro. We have to manage, we know that we have variability in that resource, and we have a set of reserves and practices that we use to manage that variability.
Yeah. Yeah, but I guess the 22 million drop in 1 year, and the anticipation is, gee, this drought isn't going to end, or it hasn't ended. So there's another year coming. Is there another 22 million drop?
No. About $11 million of that drop was related to the drought. We already have relatively low hydro included in next year's forecast, and we have new renewable resources coming online, and we have reserves that are adequate to get us through what we would see as if you look right here at the red line, about 11 million of that is drought related. This is kind of a worst case scenario. It's a sum of all of the terrible things that, the worst things that could happen to our utility.
I guess I'm just worried that next year is going to give us those same things again.
So we do a 3-year drought scenario with our financial plans. We did one last year, and we have another one coming to you this year. And a drought, there's no doubt, it draws our reserves way down. But the way you manage that, we always have the ability to change our rates mid-year if we need to. And we're going to be coming to you next year with a hydroelectric rate adjustment mechanism that we could also use to help manage that situation.
Where is our hydropower coming from?
It's coming from the Central Valley project, as well as the Calaveras Dam that we're a participant in.
Where's the Calaveras Dam?
County.
Where is that?
Yeah, it's off the Stanislaus River.
Okay, yeah, I noticed that there was a severe drop in reserves, especially in electric utilities, but it shows up in gas and wastewater as well. And, across 3 utilities to have that kind of call on reserves is startling.
So all of these are, the electric is an unanticipated, but it's something that's unanticipated, but that we've prepared for. But in a lot of these utilities, you're going to be seeing reserves being drawn down. That's because we have rate stabilization reserves that we're trying to draw down. We're setting our rate trajectory so that we draw those down and we spread our rate increases over several years. So it's intentional. We have reserves that are above what we feel like we need to prudently manage the utility.
Yeah, I guess tonight, though, we're talking about a 5-year look ahead, and in each case, you assume that this is a brief moment in time as opposed to a longer-term situation we might find ourselves in.
Well, I think that's a reasonable point, and I think that we come back every year, and we have the ability to reevaluate our situation every single year.
Good.
So as conditions change, we'll change our approach.
You're worried we're seeing a flock of black swans, I think is, right, yeah, but that's okay.
Could I asking
Yeah.
about, last year we had a very long discussion about what year of the drought we were in. And last year it might have been, thanks, it might have been 4, it might have been 5.
I think for us, when it comes to the drought and the electric utility, it's a matter of how quickly can we get to a steady state for the lowest amount of hydro that we expect that we can receive. And
How can we predict that?
well, there is some, I mean, we can predict it.
It will rain again?
What's that?
It will rain again?
Well, it's less, no, it's more that if it continues to not rain, how much hydroelectric generation are we going to get if it continues to not rain? And there is a minimum. I mean, I'm sure there's not a hard minimum. I'm sure there's a way that, no water flows in our streams, but I mean, it's almost apocalyptic. I mean, we typically will see some minimum level of hydro, even in a critically dry year. So we figure out how much money do we need in revenue during that critically dry year. We make sure when we do our 3-year drought scenario that we have enough reserves to be able to ramp up our rates to get to that steady state. And then once we get there, we can keep at that level as long as we need to.
Where are we now?
We are, you mean how long do we would need about, let's see, it would be in FY 2018 that we would reach sort of a steady state if we had to raise rates and draw down reserves in response to an extended drought. And you'll see that when you'll see that scenario when we bring you the electric financial plan on April 21st.
So you're saying about 3 more years and we would get to a predictable number? I don't want to put words in your mouth,
it's
but
more
is that
by the time we get to FY 2018, if we need to raise rates higher than what we're proposing here in response to a drought, by FY 2018, I think we could get to, we would draw down reserves to some extent, and we would raise rates a little bit more, and we would get to a point where we were raising enough revenue that even in a dry hydro year, we would be getting the revenue that we need. And then if we come out of the drought, at that point, we'd have to back off the rates.
I may bungle this point, but John will set me straight. So when our water managers manage our hydro facilities, Northern California Power Agency or the Western Area Power Administration, they actually manage it assuming, you're not going to get a great water year, and they manage the reservoir level so that they can guarantee some minimum amount of generation. The other thing that we just heard at the recent Northern California Power Agency Commission meeting is the NCPA will take certain actions to try to protect some of the generation facilities, including maybe seeking some permit modifications so that the water that they release can actually be sent through the powerhouse instead of just for fish release. So the power plant managers are looking hard at what the issues are going forward, and they are managing the water supply in the reservoir so that we can get some level of generation. Even were we to get no rain, we would still get generation, as John was saying. But that has to do with how they manage the water.
Okay. Any other comments? Yeah, Councilmember.
So, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the presentation. So I actually just wanted a brief update on the second transmission line, where we are on that, anything new, and one of the uncertainties you have is cost of smart grid implementation. So any thoughts on smart grid, of where we're going or how much it's going to cost, particularly how much it's going to cost, frankly?
Okay, well, let's deal with the first question while the budget guy in the back madly looks up smart grid, unless John knows the answer. And the smart grid is we do assume it's over tens of millions of dollars. To actually deploy smart meters throughout the city, we would do that over time, so it wouldn't all be in one year. We would just roll it out at a reasonable pace so that we could manage it within our rate structure. And I actually think John has made some assumptions about that in even this forecast here.
Dave Yen, Senior Management Analyst. So in the current forecast, we're not budgeting anything for smart grid in FY16. In 17 and 18, we're budgeting $1 million each. And then going out further than that, we're going to budget about $3 million. So these are all just preliminary numbers right now. I think we have about $500,000 right now to spend on pilot projects. So we don't have the full cost in the next 5 years budgeted yet.
So we're assuming in the forecast that the total cost, I believe, and I'd have to check on this, and I'll have it for you next meeting, but it's in the ballpark of 17 to 20 million, I think, for the smart meters, and then another 5 to 7 for smart grid projects on the distribution system itself.
So this isn't a value judgment one way or the other on the smart grid, to be honest?
No, we would have to come back.
That's what I was going to say. No one's come to council.
We have not.
I just wanted to make sure. And I also really just wanted to emphasize, and I mean, I may be very supportive of the smart grid. I don't know, because I've never seen a council presentation on let's move forward yet. None of us have. So my only concern is I don't want to inch into this without a policy decision. I want it to be a clear policy decision where we understand the costs, where we understand what that does to our rates, and all those kind of things, at least.
So we agree, and we wanted to understand it first, which is why we're running some pilots right now. And we do owe you some updates on that, but we actually don't have them quite yet because the pilots are quite new. On the transmission line question, we've been working with other parties that would be involved in the build of a transmission line. We've certainly identified Slack as a logical site for a substation interconnection. And the studies that would explain what the impacts are to the various systems, I haven't seen the results, so those are still pending.
Okay. I just want to add one more thing. For the smart grid, we are trying to develop a smart grid IT strategic plan in this year, so that we'll be bringing that to council and UAC, hopefully by the end of this calendar year.
Okay, great, thanks.
Good. John, if you want to move ahead on gas.
Actually, can I ask another question? Sorry, can I ask one more question on electricity? Essentially what we're doing with the rate stabilization is, particularly this year because of the drought, right? Our costs are fluctuating all over the place, and essentially we're shielding consumers from those fluctuations, right? Does every city in California do this? Is this standard practice for municipalities? Are there any that sort of do this less and pass the variability on to consumers?
Yeah, every city that we talk to, this is a best management practice. This is something that cities do. There are a whole variety of techniques that you can use. Reserves is one of them. We're talking about the rate adjuster. That's another one that we're used, and that's used pretty frequently. We're going to come talk to you about that. But yeah, even in a non-utility fund, you need to maintain some level of reserves to protect against contingencies.
Okay. This seems like we're entering a period of increasing volatility and anything associated with climate and so forth, so it's probably not a surprise. All right. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Eric Keniston to present on gas and wastewater.
Good evening, council members. Eric Keniston, Resource Planner. In discussing the gas utility, you'll notice that in FY 2016, we are going to be projecting no rate increases necessary. This is slightly different from what we took to the UAC a few weeks ago, where we had a fairly steady state of 3 and 4% increases going forward. Because of the health of the reserves in the gas fund, and in light of the larger increases that we're going to be needing in the water fund, we have opted in this particular case we can delay doing a rate increase for one more year and do a 7% in 2017 instead. One of the things you might notice is that in going forward, the revenues are below capital or below overall expenses, so rate increases are going to be necessary, but as I said, reserves are healthy. Looking, as John mentioned, transmission costs to us are doubling almost, but it's a smaller component of our overall gas supply. The gas supply itself is market pass-through, so that's nice if people use less. Our cost is less, if they use more, cost us more, but we're passing those charges through to everyone on a monthly basis. For CIP, we had a 2-year hiatus in budgeting, not a hiatus in actual construction. We'd already budgeted and had money set aside for some large main replacement projects. Just didn't make sense for us to go out and budget for new ones while we were still completing those. But that 2-year hiatus is over, and we're going to start moving forward with projects again in 2016 for new budgeting. One thing I would like to say about CIP, and this is one factor that we've noticed in gas, water, and wastewater, is that either because the economy is picking up or because people are finally getting serious about doing their own main replacement projects elsewhere, we've noticed that the cost per linear foot replacement costs that we're getting in the way of bids have been going up by 25 to 50% over what they were in prior years. So whereas we're budgeting with the assumption that costs are going to come back down to some level of norm, we could be seeing much higher CIP-related costs if we need to pick back up and do full main replacement. We are in the stages right now with the gas of doing an updated master plan study to determine exactly how much of our system needs to be replaced moving forward and see whether or not we can possibly shrink down the amount of main that is replaced every year. But if we have to pick back up, then costs will go up as well. As I said, we have healthy rate stabilization reserves, and we plan on drawing those down over the next couple of years and be pretty much done with them by the end of FY 2017. We'll take a little bit of hit to the operation reserve and then start building it back up again. But on the whole, we'll be remaining well above the reserve minimum and far above our risk assessment level in this particular fund. So I can leave it on that with gas, if you have any questions.
Yeah, on this slide, the operations reserve. And if you compare it to the previous slide, when you look at the previous slide, it shows a decline in reserves quite substantial from 35 million down to 27, 28. And it then grows very gradually back to 30. Presumably the whole fund grows. But on the next page, you have the reserve bouncing back as a share. That's a share of the turnover. How do you bounce back if you have the actual reserve amount lower than it was in 2014-15?
This particular slide only shows the operations reserve portion, and that is just the orange bar in this one, so that's why it's not, yeah.
Okay. So what is not keeping the pace? Is that plant replacement?
No.
So, yeah, the plant replacement reserve is one that we retired last year. It's a $1 million reserve. We retired it for all. It essentially represented the Yeah, deductible associated with our
Right.
insurance premium.
Yeah, that's the rate stabilization, right?
That's the plant replacement reserve. I'm sorry, were you referring to the rate stabilization or the plant replacement?
What's the blue at the bottom there?
The blue is the reappropriations and commitments, and this is what Walter Rossman was talking about earlier tonight. We're going to be, with these changes in budgeting practices that he's proposing, we're going to be taking a look at those reserves, and you'll probably see some changes coming to you this year, and then also probably as we work on getting a plan for dealing with these reserves.
Okay, so what
Next
you're
year as
doing
well.
here is just projecting a flat.
Exactly, we're assuming it's just flat.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Yes.
That's going on the previous slide, number 18. It's on. Sorry, number 17. So, if I'm sort of where the expense that's driving sort of on average a 4% increase is coming from. You said that the capital costs in terms of main replacements is going to be one of the major drivers. Did I understand that right?
It's going to be one of the most, I would say, one of the more variable drivers. I mean, as an overall portion, if you look, operations is a much larger segment of costs than capital investment, but we have operations costs are going to grow by roughly about 3 to 4% per year.
Okay.
There's going to be an additional bump, I would say, in the next 3 years for additional cross-border related program expenses. But when it comes to what I'm discussing with capital investment, is that's where we have some level of variability in our cost of where that could rise dramatically. We're hoping it doesn't, but that has the most potential for change.
Got it. What's the cost driver in operations?
So we have some large, what we call maintenance-type projects in operations. Eric just mentioned one, the cross-bore project, which is one that we implement to ensure the safety of our gas, actually it's of our wastewater system, but it's where gas lines could be cross-bored, and so it's quite expensive to go through and investigate every single wastewater sewer line in the city, and that's really what the expenses are. So that's embedded in the operations cost. It's not a capital project.
Right, okay. And just a quick question on the capital projects is, sorry.
Oh, if I could just add, I mean, I think one of the key, what you're seeing here with the revenue increases, that's not necessarily the cost increases. We'll get you a better breakdown of that when we get the financial plans to you.
Okay.
But you'll notice revenues are below cost, and so they need to increase faster than costs are increasing in order for us to get to a place where revenue is matching cost. And that's why you're seeing those 3 to 4% increases.
Okay.
Cost increases overall, we have a couple in the next couple of larger increases in the next couple of years associated with the gas transmission costs and the resumption of CIP. But really what we're trying to do is catch up.
I see.
I'm sorry, I was going to say expenses are only increasing between 2 and 4% over the following several years per year.
Okay, thanks.
So I have a quick follow-up on the cross-bore.
Yes,
So we started the cross-bore program a couple years ago, right? That's my recollection, like 2 years ago, right after the San Bruno incident. How many cross-bores have we actually found?
Yeah, it's a couple dozen.
So it's a couple dozen?
Yeah.
We spent a phenomenal amount of money on the cross-bore program, if I recall. Like,
A few million.
that's right. I mean,
Yeah.
a few $1 million. So I know what it is in the electric fund. In the gas fund, what does $1 million equate to in a rate increase?
It's a $50 million fund.
So it's 0.5%?
I mean, if that, it's a one-time increase, it's not ongoing, so you might need to raise rates slightly just to make that money up, but it's...
So that was going to be where I was going with that. So once we've completed our cross-bore program, have we completed it completely or not? I didn't think we had.
No.
So how much longer do we have to go with it?
I think we budget another couple years.
We're coming back this year, right?
I mean, it's next year too, right?
Yeah, so from what I understand, we're coming back with a discussion this year on exactly how much more we think we need to complete the cross-bore program.
And once we've completed it, are are we then doing, I guess, the bores differently, or is this going to have to be an ongoing expense? You indicated it's a one-time expense.
Yeah, so I understand your question. So what the process would be going forward in the future is for every a new gas service that we put in, we would instantly, at that point in time, check the sewer line and make sure it's clear.
So we won't have this?
You wouldn't go back, yeah, you wouldn't swing back through. It's just part of the project at that point.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Good. John, do you want to move ahead to wastewater?
Okay, moving ahead to wastewater. Here we have much the same scenario as gas. If you're looking, we have revenues are again below expenses. However, we're in a situation where the reserves are not quite as large. So here, where we, as John mentioned earlier, we tried to look at a scenario where we could maybe defer doing a rate increase in wastewater, and it just, the consequences for future years were quite drastic. So what we have proposed is 9% increases for the next 4 years and then tapering off. We had treatment costs are going to be going up by 5% per year. We have capital investment costs, same situation as we had in gas, although we only had a 1-year budgeting hiatus in 2014 for this one. You can see, like I said, the reserves are not quite as large, but also because the costs are much higher than the actual revenues, you're going to be seeing the rate stabilization reserve drawing down about a 1 year quicker. So it's by the end of 2016, they're pretty much going to be gone. And we're going to be dropping right down close to the reserve minimum and risk assessment levels on the current rate trajectory that we have. So all this said, though, 9% increases might seem like they're scary, but they only amount to a $2.64 per month increase. So if you look with the rate trajectory that we currently have here, by the end of, by 2021, we'd have bills a little bit less than $45 per month. If you look at the average of other agencies around us, Menlo Park, Redwood City, Los Altos, take the average of all of them, they're already sitting at $44 per month. So this one, we're doing quite well on a monthly bill comparison basis compared to everyone else. So don't know if I have much more to add on this one. So
questions, comments?
That's good, actually, yeah.
It is, but it's 50% by 2020. Why?
Yeah, I guess the question I would put on top of that is we are just investing a lot in a new plant, and you would have thought that the operating costs would be more efficient, effective, and would help keep rates low. Why are operational rates going up?
I think we'd have to defer. We probably want to get somebody from the plant to address that question, so we may need to do that as a follow-up. I don't want to speculate and not give you a good answer.
Yeah, it is striking that the year after the new plant opens, you start a 4-year pattern of 9% rate increases.
So we actually got that same question when we talked to the Utilities Advisory Commission. We actually have Jamie Allen from the plant coming tomorrow night to actually address the UAC and share his projections of the plant costs. It is a different department, just so you all know. Otherwise, I should know the answer, but I don't.
Yeah.
I'll just add that my understanding is that what we're looking at over the next, at least a decade, if not longer, it's capital improvements. So, I mean, and it's rehabilitation of the plant. So it may or may not. I mean, it may or may not result in operating savings. It may just be replacement. So.
Could I just?
Yeah, please.
So, one of the things we haven't talked about tonight, but at one of our meetings, I'd really appreciate if you'd bring it back, is a comparison with other cities, because just as Walter said earlier, we're the envy of many cities with our sales tax and property taxes. We are the same with utilities, unless we've changed in some way, and I don't think so. But we have always had very competitive rates.
I think only in electricity.
Pardon?
I think only in electricity.
Well, that's what I'd like to know. So if if you don't think we're competitive, yes, I know we are in electricity, but if you don't think we are and you think there's some other reason, I think it would be a good discussion to have one night about, you know, where we are exactly. These are unusual times in many ways. So it would be good, I think, to look at some of the surrounding cities, pick up on Menlo Park, Mountain View, and so forth. And while it's not, we don't have to go through our terms here comparing ourselves with other cities, but the only way we benchmark almost anything is to know whether we're talking salaries or whether we're talking whatever else we're talking about, road repair, is how we are doing and why. You know, Erica's just questioned, why is it going up this rapidly? So I think it would be very helpful because I think all cities are struggling right now, especially with infrastructure and so forth. And as I recall, we're the only city with 5 utilities.
I think we have 7.
Pardon?
I think there's 7, the storm drain and refuse as well, so.
In our county?
No, not a city.
As a city, I think we have 7
Oh, yes,
utilities.
I'm sorry, right, yes, missed a couple, right. Thanks. But not tonight, but at some point.
We will, when we come back with the financial plans, we will bring back the bill comparisons, but just, you know, quick summary.
Yes.
We're incredibly competitive on electric. We just saw an American Public Power Association survey, and we are one of the lowest in the state of California. We admit Santa Clara beats us out just a tiny bit. But really, I think that's really the only other municipally owned utility that we saw. Some of the other districts might be lower. On the wastewater, we're very, very competitive. On the water, we're actually high, and that's because we take 100% of the Hetch Hetchy water.
Right, yeah.
And then on gas, we're probably fairly competitive with PG&E now that we're floating the commodity rate through.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm so aware of it lately because most of my family lives in the Northeast, and they've really had one hell of a winter. And they're, you know, the heating and bills like that are just, it's phenomenal. You know, it's almost survival at this point. And they're going to have a tough spring as they go to clean up all that solid water that's sitting around every place.
Yeah, they have our water, don't they, Liz?
They have our water, yes. I've suggested shipping it out by rail. But I do think we're fortunate in so many ways. And sometimes we just need some data that supports that.
Good. Are we ready to move to water?
So just before we, actually, I'm sorry, I probably missed it, but what the 50% increase by 2020, you know, what's the elevator pitch on why is it, you know, capital improvements or?
Yeah, I mean, right now our revenues are below cost and we just need to catch up. That's the primary. If you take a look, we're quite a bit below where we need to be, and we're going to be that way for the next 4 years. So, and we were that way for 3 years prior as well. So we've been using reserves and dipping into it and delaying rate increases for a while. We lucked out in 2014 by having budgeted costs be well below, but the ride's over, so to speak. So
Looks like from this chart looks like treatment's going up the fastest.
Yeah, that's what we talked about, the plant, water quality treatment plant. It charges us they take the sewer that we collect.
Does the wastewater treatment plant, the incinerator, and the potentially a digester, does that show up anywhere in here, or is that a different place?
yeah, it doesn't show up here. It is part of the treatment cost. It's factored into their costs back to us.
So you understand there's partners. So the city, Palo Alto, is the operator of the plant, but there are a number of partners that fund the plant, and the sewer utility is one of the partners, along with East Palo Alto and Stanford and Los Altos Hills and Los Altos. So anyway, we get our fair share of that cost, and that's what you're seeing reflected in our rates.
Greg?
So I'd actually like to follow up on Eric's question because it's a good one. And I understand you guys don't have the information tonight, but I think it would be great if you got back to us a breakdown of what's really driving these costs. especially break out the treatment costs for us. I mean, we run the water, we run the regional quality treatment plant. So, I mean, I'm not 100%, it's not really I mean, it is a partner decision on a lot of this stuff, but on the other hand, we have huge input into how those rates go and what gets replaced and all of that. And so I also would like to understand how this is sort of going this way. And so a lot of information would be great, and a lot of granular information, just so.
So tomorrow night, when you come to our UAC meeting, you can hear from Jamie Allen directly.
I will, but
Report to us.
But I have to play, it's a different role as liaison. I try not to ask, I ask some questions, but I try not to dominate the conversation. And
I would think, sorry, David, do you know, is Public Works coming back with some of that for the treatment plant as well as any of their other costs?
If they were, it would be part of the annual budget process that's coming up. And we have a schedule of meetings that you guys will talk about next. So we can pass that along to the refuse folks, or to the wastewater treatment folks, to make sure that they come back with a description of their breakdown of costs as part of their night. Yeah, okay, thanks.
John, if you want to move to water.
Okay, let's finish up with water here.
We did say the biggest for last, but it is alphabetical too, so.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, the forecast we delivered to the UAC was for a 7% increase, and that was based on what we previously assumed to be a 15% increase in wholesale, in our wholesale costs. After that February meeting, we got an update from the SFPUC that they would be increasing it 30%. That's a 14% overall increase to our costs, but we're only proposing a 12% increase in rates, and we're proposing to use reserves to spread the remainder of that increase over the following few years. And like like I said earlier, we're also looking at postponing the gas rate increase to mitigate that impact. I think it's important to note that because this is an increase in wholesale rates, you're going to see a lot of other agencies throughout the Bay Area having the same percentage increases. I can tell you that San Francisco is raising rates 10% per year for the next 4 years for their retail customers. Now you might be asking why the SFPUC's wholesale rate is increasing so much, and I think a lot of you are familiar with it, but I'll run through it for the benefit of folks who aren't as familiar with the Hetch Hetchy upgrade. What you're seeing here is a chart of, this is a backup slide we threw in at the last minute here. It's, this shows the SFPUC's costs that its wholesale customers, that's Palo Alto and all the other Bay Area agencies that take water from the SFPUC, it shows the share of the SFPUC's costs that wholesale customers are responsible for. You can see that from a total cost of under $200 million in FY 2012, costs are projected to increase to over $300 million per year, and that's because of increasing debt service costs. This is all related to the Water System Improvement Project, which is a set of major seismic improvements to the Hetch Hetchy system that the SFPUC embarked on, or that San Francisco and all of the wholesale customers, including Palo Alto, agreed to embark on about a decade ago. The project started in 2007, and it's going to finish in 2019. It's a $4.6 billion project, one of the biggest water system upgrades that's going on right now in the U.S. And each year, more of this project is completed, and each year they issue a new tranche of debt to fund that phase of the project. Now we're expecting they'll be finished with that project by about 2019, 2020, and they'll be done issuing that debt. you can see it leveling off in our projections. So this is the impact that has on the wholesale water rate. I mean, it's a very simple rate to calculate. It's the amount of debt service and O&M divided by the projected sales. And they have a balancing account to make sure if they over-collect, they return it to us. If they under-collect, then they collect it from us the next year. You can see the rate, this goes all the way back to FY 2009. You can see it increasing from $1.50 per CCF all the way going up above $4 by FY 2020. Now, the red line here is last year's projection. We were expecting $3.42 per CCF. Instead, they're projecting that on July 1st, they'll be charging us $3.83 per CCF. Now, that increased rate does have to do with the fact they're projecting lower consumption from their wholesale customers. But we're not thinking of this as a drought rate because we're not expecting it to come back down. As new debt gets issued, even if consumption comes back, we're going to expect to see continuing high wholesale rate increases going up above $4 eventually in the future. Now, this projection will shift depending on how much consumption rebounds after the drought or whether it stays low. But ultimately, we're expecting to see it continue to increase. Let's see here. So I can take questions on that after. I wanted to note one other important piece of feedback we got from the UAC that we incorporated into our forecast. We were previously forecasting that consumption would return to its pre-drought levels after the drought. This was when we set this up. It was in early January. We were hoping for more rain than we got in January and February, and at this point, we're expecting water use restrictions to remain through 2016. In previous droughts, we haven't seen consumption come back to its pre-drought levels after the drought. This shows, the red line shows our current projection. The green line shows what would happen if consumption did rebound. That's the projection we were using when we talked to the UAC. This has some impact, and the impact is in the outer years. It's in FY 17, 18, and 19. When we were looking at 7% increases when we talked to the UAC, this brings it to 8%. So I think it's really important to note that the vast majority of the increases that we're looking at over the next few years are not related to the fact that people are using less. It's related to the fact that we're investing in the Hetch Hetchy water system. And I think we need to do a better job of communicating that. We're working on ways that we can do that. We're working with our communications manager. Let's see. I just want to make sure I cover all all the points I'd like to cover. Oh, I think one important thing to note here is that what you're seeing here are rate increases. In a situation where you have people conserving, the bill increases that they'll see are going to be lower. I mean, it may be 6 to 7% or 5 to 7% instead of 8%. And when you're talking about large consumption reductions like this, you have to assume that a large number of Palo Altans are conserving, so a large number of Palo Altans are going to see that benefit. So I guess just finishing up, there are a couple of uncertainties with this utility. Like Eric mentioned, the main replacement costs are something we're concerned about here, just as we are with the gas and wastewater utilities. In this utility, we're finishing up our master planning study in the spring, and we should have a better idea of whether we need to maintain the same level of main replacement, same rate of main replacement, or whether we could cut it back, or whether we have to increase it. So we're expecting that in May, and we should have better information for you next year when we bring you our rate increases. For now, we're not increasing our CIP budgets, even though, as Eric mentioned, main replacement prices have increased. Last year, we also talked to the Finance Committee about a possible major transmission line replacement to the replacement to the major transmission line that we have running up into the foothills. That's mainly used, that connects to our reservoirs, and it's mainly used for fire, it's mainly there for fire protection purposes. As part of the master plan study, we're looking at that line, we're evaluating the seismic vulnerability. We've been concerned about it because the replacement of that line could be a very expensive prospect. But we're optimistic about a potential solution that our consultant's investigating that involves adding additional valves along the line that could be used to isolate a break, and possibly, we're looking at the feasibility of this, a bypass system that could be used to bypass breaks while they're being repaired. And that would be a substantially lower cost. And I think very manageable within the rate trajectory we're looking at here. So those are the major issues with water. I'm happy to take any questions.
Let me ask a couple questions. You mentioned the word master plan. You had some specific things in mind, but comp plan, master plan, I guess it's a time to step back and take a broader look at where we are and where we want to be, just when you have a load forecast going out at least 10 years. But in the long run, I was down at the Santa Clara Valley Water Commission the other day, and they raised some longer term issues. So what does your forecast assume about jobs and housing in Palo Alto? Do you have a 20% increase in jobs and housing in your 20-year forecast?
We use growth in Palo Alto has ranged from, I think, it's averaged over the last 15 to 20 years, maybe 0.3% per year customer growth.
That's not what the city is using. The city is now using, if you take the ABAG numbers, 1.3% per year.
Okay.
If you take the city number, it might be 0.8% per year.
Okay.
With jobs growing significantly, maybe faster than that. So what would that do to your load forecast?
You would see an increase in water. You'd see an increase in water consumption that may be offset by efficiency measures. Certainly, if you have denser development, the per capita usage ends up being lower. We've noticed that with other cities we compare to. You would have a set of, to the extent it impacted the distribution system, you might have some additional distribution system investment, but that tends to be paid for with capacity fees. Overall, the operations and maintenance of the system would end up being spread among more customers, and you probably would see some savings in the, because the fixed cost would be spread among more customers.
It would be good if you coordinated with the city and used the same assumptions, so that as we look at these things, we can make comparisons.
So I need to follow up on that.
Okay.
I actually think we decided as a city not to use the ABAG numbers. I distinctly recall that.
So I think what John is looking at, though, for our purposes, really is historic use, and then he has an algorithm that makes some projections.
So I was going to say that if we use the numbers that you were suggesting, Councilmember Schmidt, we would actually be using a less conservative approach. The more water people use, the less rates go up. The more we have to spread it out. The less water people use, the higher the rates will be. So frankly, the more development we do, the more people that come in, the better the effect on the utility is. Now, it's not a value judgment, that's a fact.
Well, and it wouldn't be limited to the water utility, right?
Right, but I'm saying, so I think you want to be conservative, and you don't want to push them to make a more aggressive assumption.
I'm just saying, use the same assumption, so that we get from the water forecast the same number we're working with on the other forecast. So just a coordination.
That's a little confusing for us. So, I mean, should we be out there buying a lot more electricity on the forecast, and then we might have surplus? I mean, so I think what we're relying on is what we've actually seen. And then every year we come back to you and we make our corrections based on the
Well, I think we
forecast.
are seeing more, especially with the update of the comp plan.
So we're
Forecast going out to 2030.
right. And so again, on an annual basis, when we come back with our rates, that's just a one-year snapshot going forward. And so
Right.
that's what.
But this is the one time per year where you do take a longer term look. And it's important to coordinate that.
I hear you, and I think, but I think it's also important to remember that we have the chance to adjust every single year. If we see, or even mid-year if we need to.
Yeah,
So,
no, I understand in your annual forecast it's a different thing, but here you do have the long-term horizon.
Okay.
In the discussion at the Santa Clara Valley Water District, though, there was concern about the weather, the drought. And so questions came up of desalinization, what's going on. And my understanding is there's a consortium of water districts in the Bay Area who are running an experimental plant in the Delta or near the Delta, Marin County, somewhere. What's Palo Alto's role in that? I guess you belong to two different water districts.
So you'll have to remember, we don't really take any water from the Santa Clara Valley Water District. We take it all from Hetch Hetchy.
But you pay them and they are investing, I think.
We pay them what?
The water district,
Who's we?
city of Palo Alto.
Who's the city of Palo Alto? If we pump, we pay, but we don't have very many wells.
It is in our property tax bill.
Correct. It's not the utility. Correct. It's not the water utility.
So what you're saying is our water utility has no interest in the desalination
I'm not saying we have no
experiments?
interest, but we certainly have no economic.
Neither through San Francisco nor through Santa Clara.
Not through Santa Clara, and I can't remember what the SFPUC is doing, but they can only. I'm going to turn around and look at Jane and see if she knows.
Should we have an interest in this?
Good evening, Jane Ratchie, Assistant Director. Yeah, we're aware of this pilot project, the desalination project, and BOSCA, the agency, the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency, is the group of the 26 agencies buying water from San Francisco. They are involved in this pilot project too, and looking at that. And they have a long-term water supply strategy, and they're looking at lots of different options, including recycled water, including our potential recycled water project.
Yeah.
But currently, we don't have a huge interest in an alternative water supply because we have a very good contract with San Francisco right now. But we're aware of that project and following it through BOSCA.
But we're following it, we're not an investor in it.
That's right. I believe that some of our dues that we pay to BOSCA helped do some of the early analysis work, but there's no obligation towards a construction cost for any project like that.
Yeah.
So it's small dollars for us.
Okay. One other sort of broad horizon question. Our need for water will might grow, if California faces a long-term drought. We are tied into the southern Sierra, but we also pay property tax into Santa Clara Valley Water, specifically for the California Water Project. Would it be beneficial for Palo Alto to get an interest in water whose source is the northern tip of California, which might, 50 years from now, be a lot more secure supply than the Southern Sierras. Is there any thought, notions, ideas of?
We'll take that one again. We are updating our water integrated resource plan, and we'll be looking at options including connecting to treated water lines from the Santa Clara Valley Water District, as well as potentially using more groundwater. And we've looked at both of those in the past. They haven't looked like good options for us, but we will re-examine that now. And there's certainly different costs in those in those alternatives, and there's emergency water supply and other potential benefits that are. It's not just going to be a dollars look. So there's other values.
3 things: groundwater, emergency water, and treated water. But you didn't mention new water coming through the California water supply.
Directly to Palo Alto, that Palo Alto would have control over?
Well, the question is, could we make
I think there's no intertie right now with
I thought
Santa
there's
Clara
an
Valley Water
emergency
District.
intertie.
Oh, there's an emergency intertie between San Francisco's system and Santa Clara Valley Water District.
Yeah.
And
I'm just thinking of new marginal increases in water. Would we have an interest in getting a participation? Diversifying our supply for the long run.
Well, I mean, that's the question we'll evaluate in the Water Integrated Resource Plan. There's, this only becomes a very good alternative in something other than a normal year. In a normal year, we have more than enough of very high quality Hetch Hetchy water. And in a drought, I don't know, are they going to be forever, every year, or?
Yeah, no, people are just raising this issue for the long run. Is the Southern Sierras, the right place to put your future, 100% of your future? Okay, just to...
Can I ask a point that you just, and Ms. Fong, you said something about, we don't get 100% of our water from Hetch Hetchy, do we? We get a little bit from Santa Clara Water District, is that right?
There are some people with wells here, small number, and the city has a few wells, and to the extent we pump, we get Santa Clara Valley Water, we pay fees to the Santa Clara Valley Water District, and we take groundwater. We rarely pump as a city.
How much is it, like 1% or 2% or 0.5% or 10%?
I'm thinking it's well under 1%.
Okay.
I think it's well under 0.25%.
Okay.
There aren't that many wells that are pumping.
Okay, thanks.
I'm about ready to go, Greg. Need a vote on something?
Okay, if there are no other council comments, they just asked for our comments, so.
This is just information.
Yeah.
Right.
So if there's no further comments, I'd like to thank you very much for exciting and interesting evening and a challenging future we face.
Chair Schmidt, are you going to talk about future meetings? Great. If we could do that real quick. I think there were 2 items. One about start time for the remainder of the year for Finance Committee meetings.
Let me poll my colleagues.
Liz, the meeting's back on.
We have an option.
We're discussing the meeting.
We have an option of starting at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock.
I like 6 if you want to be truthful.
I prefer 6 because we get home earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, after the late Monday nights, it would be good if we could start at 6. Is that okay with staff?
Yes, we're fine with that.
Okay, that'd be very helpful.
Okay.
Hey, do we have any interest in starting at 5? Do we have any interest in starting at 5? I mean, I'm sure staff would prefer that. I just don't know if you guys would prefer it.
Are you thinking of May? because May, we have what, 7 meetings?
Yeah, if you look at your handout, you have a handout of the budget hearings.
I'm thinking of, I think on 427s are, well, we have a meeting on the 17th, don't we, of March, which I don't see here, but.
Yeah, that's on the back of the agenda, yeah.
May
Oh, back here.
is the mean month.
But I was thinking, and, I don't mind when we start it, but I was thinking we have a lot of meetings coming up in May and that, and I don't really like to be out to 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock every night.
I would tell you, I normally would say absolutely yes to 5 right away, but they really work till 5:30.
Who does?
The staff.
Microphone, please.
But why, but the staff would like it.
Yeah, I have one other reason.
David,
Could we not commit yet, and I'll let you know, but
what's your feeling about staff
Well,
starting at 5?
Yeah, there's a precedent. We've had meetings at 5 before. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what the big issue might be with the public is
Yeah.
would it allow people, when we're talking budgets,
Yeah.
everyone to get here at 5:30?
But let's think about it just for a month or so.
That's fine.
I may have a problem in getting here at 5.
So let's just think about it.
6 is great. I have no trouble with that.
So why don't we meet at 6 for our next meeting on
Great.
the 17th?
Yep.
And at there, we can see if 5 makes sense.
We met at 6 all last year.
Yeah.
Right, that's right.
Okay, the next meeting, what do we have? We have 3 items on that.
That's correct. Yeah, you have really the start of the budget process with the CDBG allocations from the planning department, an update on the ERP, enterprise resource planning, looking forward from the technology department. And then you also have the utility financial plan.
Come back, yeah, to look
Yes.
at
And then
the rates.
April 7th is the meeting after that, and we've got 5 items there. And then we have the 21st, and then we switch over to the other handout, and that's when we're in the thick of the budget process with, we double up on meetings essentially.
2 meetings a week,
Yeah.
for 3 weeks.
Not a week, I hope.
Yeah,
2 meetings a week.
yes,
Is it really 2 meetings a week?
Yes, 2
Yeah.
meetings a week
for 3
Yeah,
weeks.
in May,
in May.
You're right.
pretty close to that, yeah.
We could set up little cots here.
It is unbelievable.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else
That's
you
it.
need, David, to move
Yeah,
ahead?
we're good.
Okay, we'll be in touch with you if there's anything, maybe you could help me.
Sure,
If you find out anything about the 5 o'clock timing.
sure, yeah.
And
I can
if
run
you
that by us,
Take
but
a feeling whether
Really
that's
done.
appropriate for
Okay.
the public.
we'll do. Okay, thank you.
Can we go?
Okay,
Yep,
meeting
thank
is
you.
adjourned.